a romantic fantasy novella, a favorite of the Tyrant. And this is the Croft guy, and he is the main character of the story who has an attractive face. A young girl, arriving at the estate on which she is about to work, addressing a young lad calling her name Riviera Blanche. Looking at the guy, the girl doesn't understand what the point of a body that looks good is. Riviera thought about the fact that she was going to get finished anyway. The unlucky Prince Croft was banished by the previous emperor at the age of 7, causing him to spend 17 years on the eastern border of the lawless world. Duke Blanche helped Croft regain his throne after the death of the past emperor. However, the Duke wanted to become the new emperor's father-in-law, so Croft arrived at his estate a week before the coronation to learn etiquette. However, due to his training, Croft accidentally met the Duke's daughter, Princess Riviera Blanche. But contrary to Duke Blanche's expectations, it was the mad tyrant Croft who first destroyed him. A man would finish and fall into eternal sleep just to be with the heroine. A woman reads that the author wants to destroy all empires just so the two main characters can get together. The girl realizes that just a week ago she woke up in a novel she had recently read. The young lady, matching her memories with her surroundings, she recalls that as the girl lay in bed, a maid came into her room and anxiously asked if the lady was awake. The protagonist realizes that she has become Riviera Blanche's victim of tyranny. Croft is a man who was destined to become a tyrant, and he came to visit the Duchy of Blanche before entering the imperial palace. Riviera Blanche is the only legitimate daughter of the Blanche family. The girl asks what good is status, beauty, and unrivaled power. While in the room with the prince, the young lady thought about the fact that she was going to die soon anyway, and she was very scared. The prince thought about becoming emperor he would need to know imperial etiquette. However, they sent a woman who is afraid to even look at him. The young man claims that he was not warned that he would be given the Duke's daughter as his etiquette teacher. The young lady, addressing the prince, says she will do everything in her power to help him. Croft thought that different things were said about this girl, however, she really is extremely elegant. However, the young gentleman thought of scaring the girl enough to make her run away on her own. Riviera looked at the guy, realizing that his eyes spoke better than any words. However, the prince claims her to teach him, and if the young lady makes a mistake, she will die. The lady suggests we talk about their schedule. However, the prince yawns and doesn't listen at all about what the teacher is telling him. Riviera asks why now. The girl wonders what's wrong with this guy. However, he can finish her off now. The teacher thinks about how he probably wasn't taught that you can't put your feet on the table and you need to respect others. However, no one cares because they will die at his hands anyway. The protagonist asks you if he asked you to teach her. Since the girl has been afraid of dying all week, and she doesn't realize if he's a tyrant or just crazy. The teacher made a decision since she had already found no way to change the terrible future. The day should just be forgotten for everything. The young lady kicked the prince's legs out of the table with all her might. However, the guy looked at her angrily and asked if she had hit him now. The girl calmly replies that it is not proper for the emperor to put his feet on the table. The prince asks the young lady if she is speaking because she thinks he is not worthy to be emperor. The protagonist responds if His Majesty is not satisfied with her teaching methodology, he can simply ask for another teacher, and she is confident that her father will gladly honor his request. The young lady thought about what would happen if she disappointed everyone around her and the emperor wanted to give up on her. The prince will ask for a new teacher and leave the manor, and maybe then she will survive. The girl intends to do about what she thought since she has to try it. The prince looks at the teacher and doesn't understand why she's laughing. Croft ponders the girl's words and makes a decision and say no. Hearing this, the young lady wondered why he was saying that. The prince replies that he wants to see her abilities as an etiquette teacher and claims he doesn't need another teacher. The concerned young lady says that since they have little time, she will teach His Majesty only the most necessary manners and rules of etiquette. The teacher says there are many tasks and little time, so asks her to understand that the course of study can be challenging and rigorous. Croft says he can't promise he'll be an obedient student, but they need an understanding. Riviera says that if His Highness realizes that the Borderlanders are calling him a complete bastard, however, he should still pull himself together and study hard to change the opinions of those around him. The prince thought that no matter how smart the princess was, she didn't seem to understand anything, and he would have to give the girl a warning. Croft asks the princess me awful. She doesn't realize that the value of her life is no different than that of any other woman in the building. The teacher says, addressing the prince, that such jokes leave an unpleasant impression. His Highness replies that he is just joking because he feels they have had a misunderstanding. The protagonist asks the question, and whether it would bother me if everyone thought of Emperor Lewin as a man who kills people left and right. The prince downloads from his chair and sits down beside the princess. He touches her chin and says that they have yet to find out if this is a misunderstanding or the truth. The girl, plucking up courage, pushes the prince away and slaps him with her hand. The teacher makes remarks that His Highness should not touch a woman's body. The young lady reported that since the welcoming class is over, if he would allow His Highness to divert. As she walked out the door, the protagonist thought to herself that she had gone crazy. However, she had no reason to be this rabid dog destined to be a tyrant. The girl recalls that he came very close to her, and that's why her heart almost jumped out of her chest. Riviera says she didn't think the boxing lessons from her past life would be useful to her. Sitting outside the door, the young lady thinks about the fact that the prince won't try to stop her. The maid asks mistress what's wrong with her right hand. The girl replies that it's just a small bruise and it's nothing to her. The maid thought about the rumored prince being a mad border dog, and he must have been able to bite her mistress. However, no matter how beautiful the princess is, her body is weak. The princess thought about the fact that if she put in a little more effort, she might be able to triumph. Sitting in his office, the prince says the more he thinks about it, the more absurd it seems to him. Croft states about as soon as Riviere the Duke's daughter entered the room, he immediately realized all her motives. However, he was an idiot if he couldn't see between the lines of wanting to arrange their wedding. The prince reasons that the girl is just incredibly beautiful, and he was planning to get married anyway, and frankly, he wanted to avoid etiquette lessons. Suddenly a man enters the room and shrieking asks if the prince really hit Miss Blanche. The gentleman asks what kind of nonsense he's talking about. The man in the white shirt asks you if this is true. However, the captain would never raise his hand to a woman, Prince Jack to Blake explained. The blonde-haired guy say that recently 2 knights from the manor challenged him to a duel, and during that duel, he found out that the captain had attacked Miss Blanche. And clearly, unlike Melek, he didn't say anything back. Croft has his hand near his forehead telling them to get down. Melek, turning to the captain, says that he would never have believed these rumors. The captain replies that he wasn't hers, however. The man in the white shirt says because he knew it since he always trusted the captain. Black asks why the rumor started. The prince claims that the attempted assassination of the princess is serious accusations, and he could be in trouble, especially since she was the one who was assassinated there. A surprised Blake asks if the captain did everything right. Prince claims to have been chided for not just touching a woman's body. Upon hearing this, the man in the white shirt says, "What kind of garbage is this?" Melek, leaving the office, turns to the captain and says that he has disappointed him. "Prince, you say it wasn't like that, and it is bullshit, and let Blake pile on." However, the blonde-haired guy asks the prince what's wrong. Croft replies that it's no big deal, he just had a fight with the princess. Blake, turning to the captain, said that conflict with Duke Blanche would not play to their advantage, and maybe he'll apologize to the princess and not deepen the conflict. Croft hears about it and cries out that she's the one who hit him. The blonde-haired guy asks what he could have done to deserve it. Prince says the teacher was just scared, however, he did nothing of the sort, and thought it was worth it. The blonde-haired guy argues that women should be treated with kindness, especially when it comes to Princess Blanche. Ada, however, the prince had better behave differently than usual with her. Croft replies that he's trying. Black reports that Prince Pesalos is on his way, and he asks not to speak to Duke Blanche about it until he goes to the palace. Prince Pesalos is the younger brother of the last emperor and Croft's uncle. He aspires to the throne in the most unscrupulous way. After the death of the emperor, the crown prince, the first heir to the throne, died due to an unknown disease. After that, the nobles had to split, taking either the side of Prince Croft, Archduke Pesalos. However, Croft would have had a hard time if it wasn't for the rumor that it was the Grand Duke who had abandoned the crown prince. To avoid the stigma of being a murderer, he had to make a heartfelt confession, since all witnesses know that he never abdicated. Croft thought about the fact that he had never been to the palace before, so he would have to be careful. Blake suggests that the prince should start by apologizing to the princess, while saying that cultural differences were the reason for everything. Croft reports for the 3rd time that he was the one who was hit. The blonde guy says if he is, he's hurt. However, there is a bruise on the princess' arm, and suggests that he apologize anyway. Riviera, seeing the prince, greeted him, and thought about the fact that she was getting scared to look him in the eye. Sitting with the prince at the table, the young lady thought he looked embittered. And at this rate, it's definitely over. The girl thought about how she shouldn't have hit him. Suddenly, Croft says to forgive him. Hearing this, the princess thought about the fact that he had just apologized. The young lad says he is not yet used to her rules and customs. However, he hopes that the girl can understand him. The surprised teacher heard this thought why he was apologizing since she was the one who hit him. Riviera says she doesn't know what the prince is talking about. However, he has nothing to apologize for. Croft thought about the fact that it looked like the girl wasn't going to involve the Duke in this, and gladly offers to start the meal. The princess, watching His Majesty eat, thinks he is surprisingly neat, and there is not a single flaw in his table manners. The young lady thinks about the fact that if she had to complain, it would only be about the amount of food. The teacher thinks that whoever eats more will be healthier, and this is probably a remnant of his country. The young lady waited until the prince had eaten and asked if His Highness was familiar with the art of dancing. A surprised Croft replies that he has never danced before. Without much thought, the prince says the question, then he is perfectly familiar with the dances and blades performed on the battlefield. And in a different way, he's never danced before, and so he's going to make a lot of mistakes. Hearing this, the princess is pleased to think that this is very glorious. However, she'll pick on anything she can to get the prince off her back. The teacher suggests that we need to start as early as possible, and maybe today. The young guy asks if she heard him. Princess, claiming that when the emperor ascends the throne, he will have to give many balls and banquets. In addition, we will have to organize events to welcome foreigners. And if they find out the emperor can't dance, they'll laugh at His Majesty. Told about it, where the girl thought she needed to be persistent. The teacher says that as far as she knows, Croft will have no problem dancing. After Croft becomes emperor, a lot of women wanting to rise in the social hierarchy will approach him. However, after Riviere becomes empress, nobles who wish to placate the emperor will continue to send their daughters to the court, since Lillian, the protagonist whom Croft will passionately love, will be among them. There was a marvelous scene in the novella in which Croft and Lillian dance under the light of the moon. The young lady thought about how he definitely needed to learn to dance. Since the prince had no other option, he realized he would have to dance. The teacher suggests we see each other in the grand ballroom on the 1st this same at 3 o'clock. His Greatness says he doesn't really like dancing, and he realizes that the princess is unlikely to give up so easily. The Lord realizes that he has no gain from future confrontations with her, since this is only a deal in which Duke Blanche confronts Prince Pesilos. Croft realizes that he is giving him this chance in return for a place for his daughter as empress. Perhaps until the post of emperor was so close the prince didn't realize it. However, his uncle is still a duke. How much outside help is needed in times like these? His Majesty reasoned that if he continued to avoid etiquette lessons, the Duke might suspect something. Croft realizes he only has 1 week left. Like dancing or even arranging flowers, he will do whatever it takes, just to match the princess's rhythm. Melik saw the prince shrieks at the captain and apologizes for calling him trash since he got it all wrong. The man in the white shirt suggests that the captain not to worry, since Princess Blanche will soon realize how he feels. The prince asks how he feels. Melik says Blake told him everything. He says he heard that the captain loved the princess at first sight. The man in the white shirt says it's not surprising since the captain was blown away, because he shouldn't have tried to kiss her when they first met. Blake, justifying himself to the prince, says that he's a bit of an afterthought. Croft directs the 3 of them to go to the practice field. Hearing about it, Melik says it's just marvelous. The young lady asks Zeroni to find out where he was and what he was doing, because he told her Croft was fencing. The teacher thought if he didn't want to come, why didn't he say so right away? She doesn't understand why he made her wait. Practicing, the guy suddenly remembered that he had promised the princess to meet her in the Great Hall. Black asks the prince if he's forgotten his promise, and maybe suddenly he'll be beaten again. Melik tells Blake to look because it must be Princess Blanche. Blake claims it's not a princess, and the man in the white shirt says he has to ask her in person. Seeing Melik, the young lady thought he was very huge. The man addresses the lady and gives his name, and says he is a subordinate of the captain. Melik claims he's not a knight, just one of his warriors. A man asks if he can talk to the princess in the usual way. Croft saw the smiling girl thought she was very kind to him, and he came closer to her. The teacher asks what His Highness is doing here, and who thought he forgot his promise and didn't come called him a freak. The prince thought about the fact that Riviera could arrange anything in front of his subordinates, and to avoid that, he decides to leave. Melik asks the captain why he's leaving so easily. Could he be embarrassed? The man in the white shirt thought something was wrong with the captain, and maybe he said the wrong thing. The teacher thought about the fact that she couldn't see where the prince had gone. Suddenly, the girl heard Croft calling her. Getting closer to the girl, the prince thinks about the fact that since he's on the wrongdoing, he should take any punishment, whether it's her fists or her feet. After seeing the guy, the protagonist decides to leave. However, she is restrained by the prince's hand, which grabs her. At this time, the young man remembered that you can't touch a woman without permission and quickly takes his hands away. However, the girl suddenly falls. Looking at her, the prince thought about why she was so easy to fellate. At this time, the teacher thought about whether it was okay to treat other people this way. Feeling guilty, the prince offers the girl his hand to help her up. The teacher kicks the guy with her foot and shrieks what she said about not touching a woman without permission. However, after some time, the young lady felt pain in her leg. Croft walks closer to the girl and takes her in his arms, and at this time, the princess asks him what he is doing. The captain suggests that she can hit him later if she wants to. However, for now just stay still. Riviera asks why he can't just let her go. The young man placed the girl on a chair and took off her shoe. The teacher asks what he's doing and tells him to stop touching her immediately. The prince touched his toe and says, "Luckily, it looks like the bone isn't broken, and it looks like a simple bruise," and suggests the girl put something cold on it. Croft warns her to avoid those strikes. However, if she wants to hurt him, she'd rather scratch or bite him. Rivera says that she thought he was just a nut, but he's also a pervert. Young man offered to carry the girl to her room and asks if she's okay with it. A young guy takes the teacher in his arms and tells her she'd better not walk on her own for a while. Upon arriving with the girl's room, the prince tells the servant to pour very cold water into a basin. Croft takes off the young lady's shoe, and at the time, this is seen by the maid, who shrieks afterward that the prince can't do that. The maid says that if he were 100 times future emperor, he shouldn't be so insolent with their mistress. And no matter what the duke says, she'd give her life to protect their mistress. Hearing this, the prince was very surprised and thought that of course she had said not to touch her carelessly, but this was something he had not expected. However, he took his hands away from the girl and says, before using the cold water, let her take off her socks. The mistress, turning to Zerona, says she has bruised her toe and asks if she could get her some cold water. The maid asks what happened, and the young lady thinks about how she can't tell her that she kicked the future emperor. Riviera replies that it just happened. Hearing this, the maid says that the rumors were not lying that he is a terrible man. Keeping her feet in the cold water, the protagonist thought about how weak she was as she dislocated her finger slightly kicking the prince. The young lady says that Croft is not her only problem, however she must find a way to survive in this world. After a while, Croft entered the princess's room and offered to talk. The captain asks the girl if her leg is better. The protagonist replies that she feels better, but to His Highness, she thinks it will take some time to recover, and teaching dance won't be so easy anymore. The gentleman replies that it is not so important for him to learn how to dance. Riviera informs him that teaching him etiquette is becoming problematic and he should consider another man. Croft says he thinks they should talk about it already. He asks the princess if she doesn't want to teach him etiquette. Upon hearing this, the excited lady says that her father appointed her to be the prince's teacher just so they could have a relationship. The young man claims he knows all about it. Hearing this, the protagonist was very surprised. Croft informs her that he will gladly accept her as empress, and if she doesn't want to be his teacher, then let her just say so. The guy says that even if she doesn't, they will still have a wedding. The prince says that if the girl isn't sure about him, they can have an engagement ceremony before he ascends the throne. In the book, Croft chose Riviere as his empress, but even after the wedding, their relationship remained cold, and Croft got rid of her right after he met Lillian. So it seemed to her that he would be against this marriage. However, the prince has no reason to refuse the wedding, all the more unlikely that he will meet the love of his life so soon. Croft argues that refusing to learn etiquette will not help him in this situation. The princess informs the guy that she can teach him any manners he wants. The young lady says she doesn't want to, and the prince asks her about her not wanting to marry him and asks what the reason is. Riviera thinks she doesn't want to die because of him, and yet she can't tell him. The prince thought about the fact that the young lady already likes someone. He suggests that she remains his etiquette teacher until he ascends the throne with the help of the duke and takes control of the imperial palace. Croft thinks about the fact that after this, he will no longer care who her father is or what he is capable of. The young lady thinks he's pretending to treat her like an empress in order to gain the Duke of Blanche's trust. When he becomes emperor, he will eliminate the duke immediately. The protagonist realizes that this was the meaning of the words he said to her, and that is a good start to becoming a tyrant. The princess asks that after that, he can send her wherever she wants to go. The man confirms her words. Hears this young lady say that it's part for her to teach him etiquette. Croft says she doesn't really want it, but agrees at the end. The prince says it's time to go eat, and he suggests that the girl should take it easy on her leg until the swelling goes down. A young man picks up a girl in his arms to carry her to the dining room. The young lady, turning to him, says that before touching a woman, and the prince continues the conversation, saying that he knows you need to ask permission. Riviera. I think it's that she needs to do something with her body, so she has the ability to escape in case of danger. The girl thought about the fact that she needed to be on her own. Coming into the hall, the prince saw the Duke of Blanche. The Duke asks how he likes his etiquette lessons with his daughter. Looking at them, says it looks like they've gotten close. Prince says the lessons are going great and he's already learned a lot. The Duke informs him that the girl, though young, is already capable of giving His Highness the help he deserves. The prince agrees with him and says he has no doubt about it. The young man asks what news from Prince Pesselos. The Duke replies that he had, as expected, mentioned Prince Eisen. Prince Eisen is the only surviving prince besides Croft and will die at his hands. It is because of this that he will be dubbed a tyrant. In the end, Prince Pesselos, who led Eisen to his doom, bringing Lillian's niece right into Croft's arms. The protagonist is up to his ears in love with his former enemy. However, if the protagonist hadn't killed so many people along the way, maybe he would have succeeded. Duke Pesselos will require His Highness to confront Prince Eisen. Having ascended the throne, the prince must deal with this situation as soon as possible. However, it looks like the events from the original novella will be repeated in the future. Even though they made a deal, but if that mad dog as emperor gets off the chain, what's the point of her asking the girl? In the end, the Duke of Blanche will be destroyed. The main character thinks it's about what's going to happen to her. She decides to prevent these events from happening. She needs to stop Croft from falling in love with Lillian. The young lady reflects on the fact that she has a great backup plan that she has ingeniously laid out. Looking at the guy, the protagonist thinks his eyes are a bit fierce, and that's his charm. And every time she looks at him, he seems unapproachable. The main character read the novella spent the most time screaming, which advised Lillian to run away from him. However, becoming one of the minor characters in the story, the young lady realized why Lillian was so enamored with Croft. Sometimes the point about tough and serious men being excellent choices and just washes away common sense. The main character didn't take that long to read the book, but inasmuch as this is a romance novel, then everyone probably had a happy ending. And if done right, there will be a good ending. The girl thinks it's just like in the original, only she needs to make sure Lillian isn't scared, and then Croft won't go crazy missing her when she escapes. However, if they are together right away, how much bloodshed can be avoided? The protagonist wonders if she will be able to change the course of history. The young lady looks at the prince and thinks she will help him change and let him provide it to her. Riviera suggests to His Highness that after a meal with a woman he likes, then she should be invited to tea or a walk. The prince asks if that's the etiquette. Hearing this, the young lady thought what a nightmare this was and how he could have gotten off with Lillian in the first place. The young lady offers to explain since it is part of etiquette. The girl states that if he is interested in someone, it is best to take her out for a walk or have some other leisure activity after the meal. The young man agrees, and I reply that the lady has a sore leg, so the walk will not go, and offers to ride together. Riviera objects since she can walk. Prince says if he overdoes it, his leg will keep hurting. The protagonist asks if His Highness will continue to wear it. The prince replies that he doesn't care since it's not heavy. Croft thought about how she was a strange woman, and also a damn stubborn one. Since she doesn't like accepting help, however, it's also a cultural thing. The protagonist reflects on even more misunderstandings from the future emperor. The prince really thought it would all work itself out. But unlike that, Riviere took her hand and immediately let go as she crumbled to the floor. And then I bruised my finger kicking it. Croft thought about the fact that the girl had a very unusual body, and if she continued to strut around with a sprain, who at this rate would form a fracture. Without thinking for a long time, the young man takes the young lady in his arms and talks about what he thinks is best. At this time, the protagonist is thinking about the fact that she asked the prince not to touch her without permission. At that time, the lady realized why Lillian was frightened of him. Riviera warns His Majesty in a head kick to the forehead. The prince says her forehead might break and tell her to be careful. Croft says if she's angry and suggests she'd rather pull his hair. The teacher instructs His Highness to repeat after her and tells him to talk properly. The prince, repeating after the young lady, asks if she could excuse him. The girl reports that he's doing great, but only the prince has to say it first. A young lady asking for a guy to stop groping people. However, once her leg healed, he wouldn't have to worry about that anymore. The teacher says it's a minor sprain and should heal in 3 days. Prince says he thinks it will take about 3 months. Hearing this, the young lady asks if he's bullying her. His Highness replies that he is quite serious in what he says, since a sprain can't heal in 3 days. The prince tells her not to be so sure of that because he judges by experience. Croft thinks it's time for him to have some fun. The young man says it's unbelievable because she's still alive with that body. The girl agrees with him and says she's surprised too. His Majesty reports that the girl has a straight posture and moves quickly. He says if she strengthens her body and learns a trick or two, you'll be much better. Croft says it's not how much force is important in an attack, but rather the ability to distribute it properly. It is necessary to hit the vulnerable points of the enemy to cause significant damage. However, if you just attack with all your might, you will only hurt yourself. Guy claims that strength distribution skills come from muscle strengthening. The surprised girl asks what an attack is. His Majesty replies that, and since, for example, what she recently tried to do. However, it is not easy to catch a person off guard being in this position. How much damage she could have done to her neck. The young man says, since her bones can be so easily damaged by a hard blow, he suggests being palmed, like slapping. The protagonist makes a claim about how a slap is unlikely to hurt. Prince asks if it's worse than hurting herself. The girl, turning to His Highness, asks if he should just not do things worthy of such punishment. Croft replies that he'd love not to, but she knows about him just learning, doesn't she? However, her blows are not painful at all. Prince thinks of it more like the flight and landing of a butterfly. The protagonist informs him that to be a match for him, she will have to become much stronger. The prince asks if she wants him to teach her. The young lady does not understand the question, and Croft explains to her that while she will teach him etiquette, then he will teach the girl the art of battle. Upon hearing this, the protagonist says it's not necessary, and the prince objects and says that's where she disagrees with her. Riviera reasons that the prince offers to teach him the right way to be. The guy replies that you have to do good deeds. The young lady, claiming she'd rather do it all herself. Croft asks if it would be difficult for the princess to train alone. She thinks about the fact that he doesn't want to work out and will just do the exercises. Though with a body like that, even that won't be easy. And if she suddenly decides to run away, the Duke will be furious. In the novella, the prince was described as a fencing god, and the girl isn't sure, but she thinks he's an expert at handling a ball, and all the more reason to remove suspicion that she's planning something with Croft. The princess informs him that she wishes him luck in this. The prince replies that he too sincerely wishes the same for her. The prince, whom the girl thought was a terrible tyrant, turned out not to be so bad. Following her lessons after breakfast, he realized how he should be invited to tea. After all, that's why education is so important. The young lady says that the main feature of the tea is the deep flavor and suggests that it is better to drink it slowly, savoring it. Croft replies that it is too bitter and tasteless and asks how such a thing can be drunk. Hearing about it, the girl thinks her maid made such a tea on purpose. The protagonist tells Zeroni to bring tea leaves and tea utensils since they use black tea for tea drinking. The princess has made her own tea for the lord and offers to taste it for him. Enjoying the tea, the prince says it's delicious. The young lady says she is very happy since he enjoyed it. The prince thinks about doing something nice for the girl too. His Majesty asks the young lady if she would like to practice with the sword. The protagonist thought it was rude to pull out a sword in the middle of a tea party. Croft talks about how practicing with a sword is the best way to strengthen your upper body. And if she starts waving it back and forth right away, she'll probably break her arm. He suggests being careful. The girl objects that she wouldn't break her arm swinging a simple sword. The prince commands that the princess keep her hand and sword in a straight position, and let him slowly raise and lower it. Guy suggests that she lightly touch the tip of her sword to the ground and then raise it to the sky. However, the young lady can't do anything because the sword is heavy and it is unfathomable for her. Croft supports the girl and tells her to try again. He suggests that she start raising the sword from ground level, and the slower she does it, the better her muscles will develop. However, the young lady is not doing well, and the prince asks if she is accurately using all her power. He claims that if the girl tenses her stomach, she will find it easier to use it. The main character says she's doing the best she can. The tired princess asks what kind of sword it is and why it's so heavy. His Majesty replies that the sword is a bit heavier than normal blades. However, it is nevertheless not so heavy that it cannot be lifted. However, the prince agrees with the girl and says that he will prepare a wooden sword for her. The gentleman informs me that a fellow officer will be arriving today, and don't let the princess worry about it, and a ticket for the girl to tell the maids to stay away from the outhouse. The protagonist asks him about whether the prince wants to tell her that he has such a nasty temper that he might hurt her people. His Majesty replies that his temper is not exactly bad, but she is quite capable of annoying the servants. The teacher says that she doesn't like it very much that a man who can make her servants uncomfortable is coming to them. And then she remembers what the prince said about the woman. The master says it's not a man. Young ladies say that girl and she has no idea what unpleasant things she can do. However, it is telling to say that you can only say it will leave a scorched earth after her. The princess asks about who this guest is. The master replies that this woman is the red bird Kinsel, and she is a famous magician of the East. The young lady remembers that about the red bird Kinsel in the part of the novella she read. Blake, turning to the guy in the white shirt, talks about how it's all his fault, and asks why he woke her up and invited her here. As the woman slept peacefully for a year, Mage Kinsel is a witch of the East, and the black disaster about her is said to be insane. When she sees the prince, she greets him and tells him they haven't seen each other in a long time. Croft informs her not to even think about making trouble here. The prince suggests that we start by discussing whether she needs to be here at all. The mage asks when she was the one causing trouble in the first place. However, Kinsel agrees that she would never want to spend the night in a manner like this. The master tells her to follow him. His Majesty takes the mage to Riviera's room and introduces them. Kinsel says, turning to the girl that she is honored to meet her. The mage looks at the princess and says that Milik wasn't lying. Croft says that this is the woman who will marry him and become empress. The witch turning to the leader and saying that this is too much, as such beauty should be enjoyed together, and he is only going to appropriate it for himself. The princess doesn't understand what the guest is talking about. Croft informs Kinsel that he has already made up his mind and is getting married. The woman calms him down and says she doesn't mind since she just got here anyway. The protagonist doesn't understand what's going on. However, their conversation is like a chaotic exchange of phrases. The prince asks the woman if she will be leaving this place soon. The witch replies that she doesn't since she likes it here. The guy claims about her saying she didn't want to stay here. His Majesty thought to himself that at least I would tire her out easily, and there shouldn't be any problems with her. The prince pushes the woman out of the office, and seeing this, the protagonist asks where they are going, and she thinks they have something to talk about. Croft takes a seat across from the princess and claims they have nothing to talk about, and he sees that the girl is ready for him to arrive. The main character hearing this and says she will decide, looking at the situation. Hearing this, the prince asks about the exact situation. The young lady replies that such is the situation when it is discovered that His Highness makes and breaks his own promise on the same day. Croft addresses the princess that it is just a misunderstanding, and the girl replies that she is giving him the opportunity to clear up all misunderstandings by explaining himself. The prince thinks about how to explain it to her, since being Kinsel's love interest is like being a walking sacrifice. However, this is not a good development. His Highness says it's hard to explain in detail, but it seems Kinsel has fallen in love with her. The guy claims he had to say he was marrying the witch and her heard about it would back off. Prince says he was just acting up front. Suddenly, however, the protagonist asks His Highness if he likes her. The girl thought he had gotten something from her after all the beatings from her, and it could be secret feelings. The young lady is thinking about giving her place to Lillian and getting the hell out of there as soon as possible. Riviera says that she hopes His Highness will keep his promise. Upon seeing the woman, the man in the white shirt cringes, and she tells him he's too loud. Melik asks, "Oh, did she meet the princess, and is she beautiful?" Hearing this, the witch gets very angry and angrily says that he hasn't yet learned to shut up when he needs to. However, she could rip his tongue out. When Melik hears that, he shrieks that he doesn't have to. Melik asks again if the princess is probably beautiful. Kinsel replies that he will wipe this entire empire off the face of the earth if a single tear spills from her eyes. Blake meets the witch at the door to the palace, and the woman suggests that he get out of the way if he doesn't want to spoil her mood. The guy asks if she's going to sleep. The witch claims to get him off her back, or she'll send him back east. Blake says he doesn't think this magic circle can send him to the East Castle. The knight asks the woman if she is really going to stay here, and offers to take her to the Imperial Palace. Kinsel states that she has no reason to go anywhere since the leader and princess who will become empress is here. Hearing this, Blake asks if that's what the princess said. The woman says that this is what the captain said about marrying the princess and making her his empress. Hearing this, the knight is pleased to say that they have made up after all. The witch asks about the captain mistreating the princess. A flustered knight says it's just a rumor, and talks about the captain saying the princess hit him. and if he said so, it's true. The woman says he should have told her that from the beginning, since he almost made her kill the captain. Kissel reports that she needs to rest, and Blake asks how much sleep she will get this time. The witch talks about being awakened and forced to use magic, and therefore being tired. The woman suggests locking Melik up somewhere far away for 3 days, or she'll finish him off. When the witch closed the door, the knight thought it would be quiet for now. The protagonist met with her acquaintances. The ladies ask Princess Rivière who the man who will become emperor is, and is he as scary as the rumors say? The lady with brown hair asks that people from the East are cruel, and His Highness is the same. The main character I was thinking of was the Archduke who decided to spread such rumors. She needs to disprove everything while people are talking about it, since she won't allow Croft's reputation to be tarnished. This is the way she can survive. The princess states that His Highness is very calm and very cautious while remaining strong. The protagonists say that the prince is just unfamiliar with their etiquette, but however, this is temporary, since he is extremely considerate and kind. The lady with the brown hair says she's right, teaching such a wonderful person is a pleasure. Hearing about this, the protagonist thought it was exactly what should reach Lillian's ears. Riviera says they had a good time tonight and thanks her girlfriends for coming. The lady is happy to say that they would be happy to keep coming to her. Suddenly, the prince shows up and the protagonist asks him if he's going to the gym. The young lady thinks that everything will be fine since she has prepared everything for him. Looking at the girl, the prince thought that judging by her look, if he did anything wrong, he would be beaten again. Riviera looks at the prince excitedly and thinks about him showing good manners now. Croft approaches the princess and apologizes for his insolence and says that her leg hasn't healed yet and offers to carry her off. Seeing this, the girlfriends were very much surprised, and so was Mistress. Coming to the room, the prince informs that he has brought a wooden sword and placed it near the girl. The protagonist picks up the sword and says, not really though now she's thinking about it, that if she points the sword in his direction, she's committing treason, and afterwards smiles and offers to pick him up. Riviera asks what significance this has during training, and why should she train if she's not going to fight? The girl asks what she can do with a body like that. Prince claims that he wants to teach her how to fight. The young lady thinks that after her leg heals, she will just start practicing in peace. Suddenly, she saw the prince very close and thought about why he was coming toward her and whether he wanted her to crack him over the head or kiss him. The girl, however, wants neither. Croft says the girl has a lot of agility, and he thinks she just needs to build up her strength and stamina. The protagonist grabs the prince by the hair, and he apologizes and asks her to calm down. The young lady speaks, addressing His Highness, and states not everything can be fixed with an apology. The prince informs her that he just wanted to test her reaction and had no intention of kissing her. Croft once again apologizes for how much he thought this would be a good test of the reaction. Riviera turns away from the prince and informs him that this is a bad thing. Croft asks about the fact that pulling out hair is not considered cheating. The young lady says that given the way His Highness treated her, however, it doesn't seem that way to the girl. The lord says that at first he thought the princess was much tougher than she looked, but now he realizes she has a sweet side. The guy claims it will be difficult to train with an injured leg. Since Kinsel is here, have Riviera ask her to help. The protagonist says, as they now have a new guest, she would like to host a dinner for his subordinates. The gentleman asks if this is necessary. The young lady says that given that they will be dating in the future, it seems to her that getting to know each other better over dinner would be a good idea. The gentleman states that they will meet in 3 days then, and will think about it, since Kinsel will sleep for 3 days. Croft says a witch can sleep well for 3 months at a time. The surprised young lady says that in 3 days, her leg will be fully healed. Prince says they have a lot of work to do until then. The princess's assistance in pairing the reading of the complicated documents sent by Duke Blanche is especially gratifying, and she explains it much better than it says. Beautiful voice, pleasant pronunciation, and a calm tone soothing the mind. Even stories of complex power conflicts are no longer so incomprehensible if Riviera tells them. The prince thinks that if she were a simple beauty, it wouldn't be the same. His Majesty asks about the fact that the history of 300 years ago is so interesting. The young lady reports that the events of the future are just a reflection of the past, and there's nothing wrong with knowing a little history. The prince claims naive conclusions from the princess, since history was written by liars who twisted everything to their whim. The emperor is always described in history books as unbelievable, and his sordid personal life is never written about. Having overthrown the empress, he finished her off and sent their young son to the eastern frontier to certain death. And in the books of the emperors, they are glorified as saints. The protagonist thought about if you look at it that way, she even felt sorry for Croft. The The princess says that not everyone believes these lies and suggests they go out to eat. Sir Gillian comes to Lady Riviere shrieking and says it's a challenge to their entire duchy, and he can't let the dishonorable death of his subordinate just go away. The man says he wants to challenge this fucked-up witch to a duel and asks the mistress for the right to do so. The princess says she understands his feelings, but this girl is a subordinate of His Highness. However, one should not do rash things, at least until they know what really happened. Hearing this, Sir Gillian says that it was a mad woman who sneaked into the bedroom and plunged him into eternal sleep, as he could not even defend himself because he had no weapons. The man claims he knows absolutely everything there is to know. The young lady thought of the poofy woman being Kinsel. This story happened 3 days after the witch moved in. It was quiet at first, and the young lady doesn't know why the woman did it. Knight talks about how when they found out what had happened, Kinsel was already gone, and only Hamilton's body remained. The princess, arguing that they should wait since she did not intend to just start a conflict with the emperor. However, if he does do something reckless, have him ready to remove the crest of their clan from his armor. The man claims Hamilton was finished. The young ladies say that she understands everything, however they don't ask him to forget it either. The girl says she's only asking to be given some time. Coming to the prince, the protagonist asks him if he is going to finish off the commander of the guards. His Highness replies that if he wants to fight his subordinate, that's fine with him. However, the prince claims that he can fight on behalf of Kissel. Croft asks the princess if she doesn't think he'll lose. The young lady replies that even if that were possible, her father would have strangled the commander himself. The princess asks if the witch has escaped. Croft says she's too crazy to run away in fear of punishment. His Highness, along with the princess, came to Kinsel's room. A woman asks the princess what happened to her leg. The young lady replies that she just dislocated her finger. Kinsel talks about how she hopes from now on they will be a little closer to each other. The princess stops clinging to the lord and thanks him. A young lady turning to the witch asks why she finished off Lord Hamilton. The woman replies that she did everything in her power. The princess asks if he was rude to her. Kinsel says that if he had done anything to her, he'd still be walking on his own 2 feet. However, even though she is a princess, she can't tell her all the truth, because one little bird didn't want her to blab. Croft says he doesn't think taking out one of the local guards is bad for them. However, he would even say it was to their advantage. The princess turns to the woman and says she has a right to know why one of the protectors of her family was finished off. The protagonist argues that if his death was unjust, then she will have to punish the perpetrator. A surprised Kinsel asks the young lady if he was someone important to her and why she cares so much. The protagonist says she didn't know him personally, but he had been in her family for a long time. Kinsel says if the princess is responsible for such things, she will ask her permission to finish off Duke Blanche in the future. The woman informs me that she will gladly accept a duel from the Togo captain of the guard, and asks if she can finish him off. Hear this princess say no. Suddenly, a maid knocks on the door and apologizes because someone wants to talk to them. Seeing a worried maid, the princess asks her if she has anything to say. Kinsel approaches the maid and tells her she doesn't have to talk about it. The princess asks what her name is, and the maid gives her name as Barry. The protagonist suggests that Barry take it easy and say whatever she wants. The maid reports that the sorceress was just trying to save her. The story told to her turned out to be an ordinary one. It's a rare case of a knight being finished off for trying to defile a servant. After hearing all this, the princess turns to Zeroni and says that this girl is now her maid, and let her teach her everything she needs to know. The young lady says to tell Sir Gillian to come into her study. When Gillian comes to the office, the princess says as soon as he pulls out the blade, he will be immediately excluded from the order of the Knights of the Duchy of Blanche. The man cries out that this witch killed the lord. Princess says Hamilton will also be posthumously stripped of the title of Knight of Blanche. Upon hearing this, the man cries out that it is not enough for the lord to die a dishonorable death, or else he will also be stripped of his title posthumously. He argues that this is unacceptable. Riviere warns Sir that if he continues to defend the man who defiled the Duke of Blanche's name, action will be taken against him as well. The astonished man asks what the lord has done. However, it's not a mortal sin, is it? Hearing this, the princess replies that it's none of her business, and the man says in a rage that it's also none of this witch's business. Sir Hamilton reports that he is the leader, and he is obliged to avenge the unjust death of the lord. A man approaches the witch and challenges her to a duel. The enchantress agrees and accepts his challenge. However, a whirlwind gossip interferes with the prince and says that he will fight in her place. Croft claims that Kinsel has already finished off one Duke Knight, and now he will finish off the commander as well. However, when the Duchy of Blanche needs protection, then he can't let him finish him off. The Enchantress asks why he will fight, since she's the one who got the challenge. The Lord replies that she will repay this debt in the future, but for now, he will take care of it. The princess thought about not letting the rumor go out that he was challenged to a duel by a subordinate of the family that supports him. The young lady is informed that in such a case, the commander of the guard has the same right to be replaced. The protagonist, addressing His Highness, says that being the Duchess of Blanche, and in this duel with him, she will fight him. Everyone who heard this was very surprised. The surprised Duke asks why her. The princess replies, since the Order of Knights is under the jurisdiction of the duchy, therefore she is in charge, and asks if she is wrong. The young lady reports that in any case, let him make sure that in the future, the knights will not spread the word about it, as the duel will take place tomorrow, and Sir Gillian may be free. The man objects, but the princess instructs him to stop and leave. The prince tells the enchantress to get out of here too, and have her go back to the outhouse and sit there quietly. Hearing this, Kinsel agrees and says they will see each other tomorrow. Left alone, the princess asks His Highness if he is going to finish her off. Hearing this, the young guy asks if she's joking. The young lady replies that she means what she says, and she doesn't have the guts to joke around with her life. The prince calms her down and tells her that he has no intention of doing so. Riviera claims she also has no intention of finishing him off, and that means everything is fine. Before the duel, Blake informs the captain that there is no way he should wear the princess, and the gentleman replies that he knows about it. The knight suggests he just swing his sword a couple times and end the duel. The prince says if he tries to knock the sword out of her hands, who might break her arm. The lord offers to bring wooden swords. Seeing these swords, the young lady says that she will definitely not fight with wood, and the prince asks if she is going to fight with her bare hands. His Majesty asks the girl if she's going to use a real sword. The princess replies since it's a duel, and the prince asks for a lighter rapier. In this duel, the winner gets. All are entitled to truth and honor, and the loser is obliged to comply with the loser's demands. After these words, the knight offers to start and raises his sword to the princess. The young lady raising her sword says that she has done well. However, the girl can no longer lift the sword as it is being pressed by the prince. The master says that's what the rules of dueling say you have to do. The princess started swinging her sword, and suddenly the prince's sword flew away for some reason. Riviera herself doesn't realize how, but she hurt the prince. His Majesty says he has lost and asks that the good-natured princess not take his life. That said, ask her what she expects and let her announce that the duel is over. Sir Gillian asks what this duel is all about. However, he says that the duel is officially declared over. Kinsel comes closer to the girl and asks if the princess is okay. The concerned young lady says she hurt him. The enchantress smiles and says that's a good thing. The surprised princess asks what's so good about it. The woman says that the only thing to do is to treat the wound and wrap it up, and there's nothing else to do. The protagonist thought that if something goes wrong, she could die without even getting to the palace. Concerned princess, turning to His Majesty and asking if he is all right. The gentleman replies that she's been told it's early, just needs to be wrapped up. Riviera takes the prince's hand and suggests he go for treatment. The enchantress talks about how the princess is far more determined than she seems. Blake agrees with the woman and says that she stole the captain's heart for a reason. However, it's funny because it's a very unexpected development. The protagonist thinks about what she should do if simple wound care won't help here, and whether stitches are necessary. The girl thinks about what happens if the wound gets worse, if he dies of infection or something. However, she will be finished off at the same time for treason. The prince, turning to the girl, says she's taking off his clothes right now. Upon hearing this, the princess says she didn't mean it and apologizes. Seeing the wound, the young lady says he needs treatment as he is bleeding. The prince talks about getting naked himself. Seeing the wound in its entirety tells the girl that this bruise is serious. Prince says she sounds like she's upset about it. Riviera wonders if that's possible. The gentleman replies that it would seem so to anyone. The protagonist reports that she wouldn't have worried if she knew he had such a strong body. The prince survived countless attacks and became an emperor despite all odds. To endure such wounds just because he wanted to live so badly. His Majesty, turning to the girl, says that she is now groping him. The disturbed girl didn't even notice it and apologized for her action. The master says he will be magnanimous and forgive her, since he now understands why she said to ask permission before touching her. After changing his shirt, the prince leaned over to the girl and kissed her. After the kiss, the surprised lady asks what that was about. The gentleman replies that he just felt he had to do it, since it's not a mistake, and she's the first to start. The princess says it was His Highness who started it. However, it was generally rude. Croft agrees with the girl and asks that she listen to him. The master says she is the first person to look at his scars in this way, and so he kissed her. The young lady thought about punching him. The main character thought about how everything would be fine if she didn't have that look. However, she doesn't feel anything special for Croft, because she just felt sorry for him, and that's all. Riviera suggests that it's time for him to think about issues about his personal life. The prince replies that his personal life has been a mess from the beginning, and let her bring up the fact that even his father wanted to finish him off. The princess, cringing, says that's not what she means. A surprised Croft asks the girl if kissing is forbidden in society. The young lady replies that that's not the point, since he shouldn't kiss anyone without permission. His Majesty says, does she want to tell him that there will be no problem if she gives him her permission to kiss her? Prince says his skills have improved, but he is the type of person who learns by doing. Upon hearing this, the young lady replies that she thinks she should have punched him in the face. Croft replies that if she did, she would break a couple fingers on her hand. The protagonist says that he will never be able to win a woman's heart with such actions, and they will rather hate him and try to run away. His Majesty looked at the young lady and realized what he was doing wrong, and so he asks the girl for forgiveness. Riviera calms the prince down and tells him it's okay, and suggests he not do it again. Croft asks the princess what she's asking for as a winner. The prince explains that she won the duel and has been magnanimous in sparing his life, and now she has the right to demand anything from him. The surprised girl asks the prince if he accepts defeat. His Majesty replies that it doesn't matter what she thinks about it since she won, and let her say what she wants. The protagonist says that she wants to be exiled from the imperial palace in the future. She asks if he can draw up a contract certified by a magician. A surprised Croft says she doesn't trust him. The young lady says they're not that close. However, the prince turns to the lady and says that he trusts her. Riviera explains to the prince that she's pretty careful. His Majesty says he will find a magician who can seal their treaty. Riviera thought about the fact that he was hard to understand. Because the prince is so ruthless, he's capable of doing anything. However, if you look at it that way, it all starts to make sense. The protagonist ponders what the only thing is. What can be said about Prince is that he has a handsome face and a great body. However, she doesn't understand what the point of that beauty is if it's never going to be hers, and she doesn't want to watch him make out with other people. Suddenly, a maid knocks on the Lord's office and then opens the door and shrieks and says that His Highness doesn't notice that the young lady is in great trouble, and he pretends not to notice. The surprised prince asks what the trouble is. The maid replies that the Duke is scolding the princess for dueling, and he's been berating the mistress for an hour because he wants to kick her out of her home. Hearing this, the prince quickly went out to rescue the lady. However, stopping in front of the door, he heard shouting. Mr. Blanche claims that he asked the princess to take care of His Highness, and she dueled. He says she has no idea how much effort he puts in for her. Hearing this, Croft opened the door and greeted the Duke, reported history Faith will become her empress, and so it is not necessary to punish her so harshly. The Duke excuses himself and says that he wasn't trying to scold the princess as he was just making some points. He turns to the girl and suggests that she rest as there is much to prepare tomorrow. The young lady leaves and turns to His Highness saying she needs to talk to him about Count Tesla. Croft reasons that today this boredom will end because it's been a week since he arrived in the capital to ascend to the throne. However, only a week remained until the coronation ceremony. His Highness is thinking about the fact that he will soon be back where he was kicked out of 17 years ago. The imperial palace of the Louvance Empire was much larger and more majestic than she had imagined when she read the novella. It took an entire morning to tour this huge and luxurious palace. However, despite the fact that returned here after 17 years, Croft behaves so confidently as if he has lived here all his life, and it has the aura of the owner of this place. However, the princess noticed that all the evil looks were directed at the master, as there is a faint sense of fear and contempt in their eyes. It's also a highly unintentional attitude, since the prince has yet to do anything worth hating. The protagonist is concerned with the question of why they treat the emperor this way. And if the emperor is treated this way by his servants, there is no need to imagine the reaction of the other nobles. The young lady thought about the fact that Croft wasn't bad enough to treat him like that. Upon seeing the intended lady, His Majesty asks the princess if the food is to her liking. The girl replies that everything is delicious. The prince suggests that she eat a little more. Following noble etiquette, it is not customary to offer one's food to others. The young lady thought about the fact that she hadn't said anything against it. The protagonist asks the servant how he dares to laugh at the emperor in such a situation. And judging by his laughter, something funny seems to have happened. Concerned, the servant replies that he didn't laugh. The young lady asks what so funny happened and suggests that he tell him, and they'll laugh together. The servant says it's not a big deal. Princess says if he can't stand still, she thinks he doesn't belong here. Croft commands that this man be thrown out of the palace. Hearing this, the servant turns to His Highness and says that he has made a mistake and asks for forgiveness. The prince turns to the young lady and says, since he is no longer here, she can relax. The protagonist reflects on the fact that on her first day at the palace, she threw out a servant for disrespecting Croft. However, she can't believe she did it. Lying in Riviera's bed, reflecting on the fact that she had planned to keep quiet and quickly seal the pact with Croft with the help of the mage, give her place to Lillian, and ride off into the sunset. The princess can't sleep for a long time as she thinks everything has gone wrong. Croft can't sleep either, and thinks about the fact that, as expected, the current palace is a huge trap. Since he has Blake, Mielik, Chest, and Kinsel with him, and yet they are noticeably outnumbered. Going to the throne to His Majesty, servants and nobles bow. But still, the emperor thinks that everywhere are hidden guards and potential enemies. The prince is certain that Duke Pesalos has already embedded his men everywhere. His Majesty is also aware of the disrespectful attitude of the servants, because everyone here looks at him as an uninvited guest, and he can't help but notice it. Croft thinks about the fact that this is what he expected, but he still feels bad, and remembering a day from his childhood, he thinks that nothing has changed in so many years. And while the prince pondered a solution to the problem, Riviera herself offered him one. They just need to get rid of their enemies and keep the people who can be his allies as close to him as possible. The next day, Riviera, seeing the emperor, asks if he slept well. His Majesty realizes that the lady is a necessary ally, and looked at the girl feeling like he was missing something and it could be her thin lips. Excited, the prince ponders the fact that whether she kicks him or rips his head off, he thinks she'll be very angry. Looking at the adorable main character, the guy smiled and thought about the fact that he didn't want to make her angry. Riviera thought about the fact that this was the first time she'd ever seen him smile, and it was probably because he happened to be home. However, she feels sorry for him because he has no one to share this joy with. Croft asks the princess if she enjoyed today's meal. The girl replies that it was delicious and thought it was good that they changed the chef. The prince was informed that he would like to walk to the banquet hall and asked if she would keep him company. Heiner Hall is the great banquet hall of the imperial palace. It was there that Croft's coronation would be celebrated in 6 days. There, however, the prince will meet Lillian, the protagonist of the original novel. The hall had certainly been described as a magnificent place, and looking at it, the girl realized it wasn't over the top. However, the original story starts in a few days. Hey, the main character hasn't even lived a month in this book. The young lady thinks she is still unaccustomed here, but if she doesn't want to die, she's not allowed to act weird. Croft was being nasty to Lillian on coronation day. However, it was love at first sight. In this story, the male protagonist is an incomprehensible and cruel tyrant, and at the same time, Lillian is an extremely inaccessible and secretive lady. Riviera realizes why Lillian didn't immediately open up to Croft given their first meeting. She could have just been scared of the prince. The protagonist thinks about bringing them together without the complexities experienced in the book she needs to do a good job on Croft. Looking at the princess, His Magnificence asks if she wants to say something, then go ahead. The lady replies that she doesn't want to say anything. Suddenly, the protagonist sees a black veil and inquires about this one being the veil that was used at the funeral of the past emperor. The maid replies that it was prepared especially for the coronation ceremony. The princess asks whose idea it was. The maid replies that Princess Belinda did it. The protagonist wonders if she is referring to the Countess Travitt, and why she chose the setting for the ceremony. The maid replies that no one else has the right to decide such matters but her. The emperor and the crown prince are dead. For a whole month, the empire was without an elected emperor. Before Croft was chosen all this time, someone had to run the life of the palace. However, that person was Belinda, the younger sister of Duke Pesalos. Pesalos pretends not to care about the throne, but in reality, he is secretly gaining power and influence to win it. He even sent his younger sister, who had become a nun 20 years ago, to take over the palace. Since this black cloth is a greeting to a nephew returning after 17 years, the protagonist tells me to take this thing off immediately, since she'll pick out the new decorations herself and have the manager brought in. Croft looked at the servants and reports that they were doing what the princess said. Prince says, and what if he honestly says he doesn't care about the scenery? The young lady, upon hearing this, objects as they are preparing for a beautiful event, not someone's death, and asks how he could care less. The prince replies that it doesn't matter whether the rag is white or black, as it doesn't change the fact that he is the emperor. However, given that Croft has been fighting for his life for quite some time now, he really could care less. The character in the book can take care of themselves, and the girl just needs to save her life. The protagonist reflects on the fact that she now knows Croft personally, because he may be weird, but he's clearly not the crazy bastard he's described as in the novel, and the girl just doesn't want to be treated so unfairly. The princess claims to care, and the surprised prince asks why. The young lady replies that they are trying to show that he is not welcome here. Hearing this, the protagonist does not understand His Majesty is very angry or laughs at her words. The prince, turning to Riviere, says that she can be his all she wants, but he's still going to kiss her. After the kiss, the surprised girl pushes the prince away from you and says you can't do that. The master asks if she's okay, and the young lady replies that his chin is made of steel. The main character asks why he suddenly decided to kiss her. The prince briefly thought to reply that she had said she felt sorry for him. The gentleman says the girl has sympathy for him. Upon hearing this, Riviera tells him not to dare talk about her being the first person to feel sympathy for him. The princess suggests going somewhere else for starters, because she'd like something refreshing to drink. His Majesty says there is a small garden outside. Croft looks at the girl with pleasure and asks if her leg hurts since he can carry her. The princess assures him not to do it. Sitting in a beautiful garden, the prince looks at the girl and ponders why he wanted to kiss her. However, he is still experiencing a similar desire. His Majesty thinks it might be curiosity or impulse. However, this impulse disappears as soon as someone shows reluctance. The master ponders why this woman is so different from the others. In the East, people exploit others without any pity. Prince recalls when he was exiled there, he was only focused on survival. Trying to survive, Croft made enemies and gained comrades who could have his back. The mercenaries of Vindictus Place all joined forces to seek revenge. Though they supported each other, but still these people came together for their own goals and needs. Since even so that there is a special relationship between these four, they have no sympathy for each other. Mutual camaraderie is far from sympathetic. However, sympathy, how rare and valuable is this cheap feeling about which people so readily speak, is known to all the inhabitants of the East. Willingness to lend a friend a helping hand to another, even if there is no benefit to him. Prince look at the young lady says he first got it because of her, because she deserves to be special. However, as Riviere argues, kissing falls into a slightly different category. And even with a frown, the young lady remains a real beauty. Croft thinks the problem is those lips since they give rise to his afternoon bad intentions. The princess informs His Highness that if she had to kiss all those for whom she feels pity, she would, by that logic, kiss a street cat. As the same is true for begging starving children and wounded soldiers. Upon hearing this, the prince says he understands and suggests she stop since he doesn't even want to imagine it. The lady asks what lesson he has learned from this. Croft replies that she has a big heart capable of sympathizing with anyone and that she doesn't want to kiss him. Here this main character say that's good because he's got it all figured out. Prince makes a statement about how maybe empathy isn't that important to her, but it's a special thing to him. However, the gentleman still wants to kiss her, so let the lady tell him what to do for that. The protagonist informs the gentleman that such words sound quite offensive, since kissing should happen between people who really love each other. Croft says there can't be such a thing, and the place Toho says she's talking about love, offers to figure out a way. Hearing this, Riviera thinks about the fact that this is spoken by the man who slaughtered the people of the Empire because of love. Young lady, addressing His Highness, asks if he thinks love doesn't exist. Since he just doesn't need to meet someone he will love and make her his empress. The prince informs that there is no such thing as love, and it is just an illusion, misunderstanding, or deception. Hearing this, the young lady thinks that he is too confident despite the fact that he hasn't met the main character yet. The lady claims about whatever he says she still believes in love, and she doesn't want to make out with someone she doesn't feel that way about, and offers not to say that again. Croft pronounced, since she doesn't want him to do anything about it, and in that case, she will continue to feel sympathy for him. The girl claims she will until someone comes along who feels more sorry for him than she does. The prince is heard saying that he is satisfied with this and offers the girl a vacation. The gentleman recalls that when he was a child, a woman told him that he should not hate the emperor because he did so because he loved his mother very much. However, when he's an adult, he realizes it's bullshit. Upon seeing Riviera, the maid asks what happened to her forehead again, as it is swollen and red. Zeroni was an additional character that wasn't even mentioned in the original. She probably died at the same time as Riviere Blanche. The young lady reflects on the fact that she wasn't interested in her before, so she didn't even think about it. The maid offers a good look at her forehead and asks if it hurts. Lady, you do realize that she sees and talks to her every day now. However, Zeroni is not just one of the additional characters. Anna is a valuable person who followed her even to the palace. Riviera asks the maid if she will move for a while. Zeroni crouches down and thinks about the fact that Mistress doesn't usually do this, and maybe she's mad. The young lady reports that her forehead must have turned red because she bumped His Highness's chin. And when His Highness first came to the duchy, her hand reddened as she slapped the prince across the face. However, kicking him in the leg, she dislocated her toe. The maid, hearing all this, is very surprised, and the princess asks her if she was very much worried. Zeroni replies that of course she was worried, but more importantly, it should be because she hit him for misbehaving. Riviera claims the maid knows her beautifully. She wants to assure her that there's no cause for concern. The lady reports that she is looking for a compromise. The maid says that since she already knows everything, she won't worry about her too much. Sitting down to a meal, the lady addresses His Highness and informs him that he should learn to dance. The prince replies that he doesn't want to. Riviera thought about the fact that he would have to dance with the main character since dancing is mandatory. She claims about the prince asking her to teach him etiquette, since dancing is a basic skill among noble lords. Croft thinks about the fact that the teacher continues to pester with lessons because in the imperial palace, so there is a lot of work to do, and he still needs to embrace the lady and spin. The prince thought about the fact that he could encompass Riviera, and being close to her offers her to start studying in 2 hours. The protagonist proposes to call musicians. Heard about it, the guy thought that because of them, he would not be able to touch her lips. Arriving at the hall, the prince asks if he is late. The young lady replies that he arrived just in time, and the musicians began to play. The protagonist informs His Highness that when he asks a lady to dance, who must bow his head and ask her permission. However, there are no specific phrases to invite. Croft does as his teacher has shown him and asks her if she will refuse him the honor of dancing with him. The mistress agrees to dance with him and tells him that he knows exactly what to do without her instruction. Croft kisses the lady's hand and then bites it. The surprised girl slaps the prince in the face and makes a statement about not biting people. Excited mistress asks why he did it and didn't get full at dinner. Riviera thinks about the fact that she was joking and doesn't understand why there is no response. She doesn't realize if that was the setting in the novel, but it's a love story anyway. And that's not how it's supposed to be. The moment he touched her lips, he thought they exuded a sweet fragrance. Soft and smooth fingers slightly colder than her lips. A scent that turned his head, and the prince had a strange urge to swallow her. He ended up biting that tender flesh. Croft says he won't eat her and asks who she thinks he is. Riviera suggests continuing to learn dance. She gives him her right hand and tells him to hold it, and he can put his left arm around her waist. His Highness thought about how the princess's waist was so thin that she didn't even know what to hold on to. The lady suggests taking the simplest of steps, right and back, left and forward. The princess asks if he's having a hard time and suggests not to worry even if he steps on her foot. The girl will still forgive him. The gentleman is thinking about the fact that if he steps on that little foot, it will break without a doubt. He claims he will be considerate and not step on any toes. The lady says she'd be only too happy if the prince would try harder and offers to try again. Twirling in the dance, the prince smells her fragrance and thinks of him embracing a bouquet of flowers. The lady reports that the first song is over and His Highness is learning fast. The teacher says you can bow after the music is over and shows how. Croft suggests taking a little breather, and the teacher agrees with him. The gentleman thinks about the fact that the first thing he did after arriving at the palace was dance. His Majesty, seeing his friends from the east, asks what they are doing here. The guys claim that the captain is a very good dancer, and maybe it's because he has a special teacher. The prince says they don't have enough work, and so they are idle. Blake reports that they came to make a report and waited for the captain because they didn't want to interfere. The blonde-haired guy reports that Kaisel has figured it all out and asks if he should tell her to catch and bring her in. Croft states don't touch it yet since first, you need to find evidence. The teacher, seeing the captain and his friends, asks if they have important things to do and if they will finish today. The guy says they will continue. The lady claims he has things to do, and so that's enough for today. The prince offers to host Riviere. Walking down the corridor, the princess says his subordinates follow him unreservedly. The gentleman says that is not the case at all. The teacher says she thought they seemed very close, and especially Melik obviously likes him. The prince says that all the mercenaries who call him captain have come together for revenge. The princess realizes that these people have their own reasons. The Lord speaks of Melik joining the mercenaries to avenge his father on him. His Highness reports that he finished off Melik's father. The boy, to become stronger than him and get revenge, he joined his squad. The young lady asks why he keeps a man in his charge who is going to finish him off. However, as a loved one with whom one comes face to face on a daily basis, the princess doesn't realize what kind of life you have to live to have a relationship like this. Arriving at Riviere's room, the gentleman offers the girl a good night's rest. The young lady thinks that because he is a tyrant, life in danger has become commonplace for him. However, she had never even considered the reason for his tyranny. The princess just wants to get assurance from the magician and raise Croft the best she can. She wishes to replenish her strength and leave the imperial palace safely. The days fly by so quickly. Although the prince is far from having a wonderful character, the young lady wants to continue to take care of him. The next day, Rivera looked at herself in the mirror and saw a bruise, and she thought of Croft's body being made of steel. However, she needs to ask Zeroni to put some ointment on her. The maid, after putting ointment on her forehead, asks if it hurts. Mistress replies that it's fine and asks if it can be covered up. Zeroni argues that cosmetics won't be enough. The head maid enters the lady's room and informs her that Princess Belinda has come to see the lady. Riviera says she's not feeling well today and therefore can't host. She asks me to tell the guests that the princess will invite her later. The maid claims that Princess Belinda is the younger sister of the late emperor. She's a member of the imperial family, and by law they can't escort her out. Riviera says it's a breach of etiquette to just show up and ask for a meeting. As she tries to turn a blind eye to the princess's rude behavior, and while the maid is teaching her the rules of etiquette, the head maid to argue that imperial law is above aristocratic etiquette. Hearing this, Riviera ponders whether she means that the young lady should not ruin her relationship with the person she will have to treat as an aunt in the future. However, in reality, the young lady does not intend to remain an empress. Riviera claims that she is only staying here as a guest invited by His Highness, and there's no reason for the princess to insist on seeing her. The protagonist argues that the maid has no right to teach her. The maid informs the young lady not to speak. Princess Belinda is the only aunt of His Highness. If she becomes her enemy, it won't be any harder for His Highness to ascend the throne. Upon hearing this, Riviera thought about the fact that she didn't want to give herself an unnecessary headache and agrees to go. Upon arriving at the Countess's room, the young lady apologizes for keeping her waiting. Upon seeing the girl, the woman smiles and says she is pleased to meet her. However, despite her rudeness, the Countess came here to say something to the princess. Rivera asks if everything is all right, ma'am, and says that she has heard that the Countess has urgent business and offers to talk about it. Countess Travitt introduces Emily to the princess and tells her that she is the daughter of a family with whom she has a good relationship. The woman introduces the princess to the girl Lillian from the Viscounty of Ilmond. The Countess reports that they have come together to meet the princess. She claims that this elegant data would be perfect for the role of her assistants. Auntie says she heard that Riviere came to the palace without a maid of honor. However, as a senior member of the imperial family, she could not ignore this fact, and so brought these ladies to be her maid of honor. The princess reflects that she did not ask, however, the Countess has invited candidates for maid of honor from among her acquaintances. Since among the emperor's concubines were many of the empress's servants' maids of honor, that must be what Belinda is aiming for. Riviera thinks it would be possible to just say no, however here Lillian is, and if the prince meets her sooner, the sooner he'll fall in love. Since in this situation, the young lady realizes that she should be happy that things are going well. However, she develops a sense of resistance. The protagonist reports that she already has an assistant. The Duchess argues that the maid of an aristocratic family and the maid of honor of an imperial palace are radically different. However, she also needs a wise maid of honor, and Emily is better than anyone else in the imperial palace because the Countess personally taught her. And the same goes for the Archduke's niece, Lillian. Riviera claims to be staying here for a short time at His Highness's invitation, and so she doesn't need much help. The woman says, even if she returns to the duchy, these ladies would do well to pee here. The Countess asks that the princess not be denied her favor. The young lady thinks it's hard to refuse and offers to accept the help of one of them, since she wasn't sure if it was possible to invite 2 guests without His Highness's permission. Riviera turns to Lillian Ilmenda and asks if she can help her from now on. The Countess claims that this girl will be a good assistant for the princess. The protagonist looks at the girl and says she's glad they met. Riviera reflects that in many ways the tranquility of this world and her life is in Lillian's hands. Left alone in the room, the young lady reassures herself that everything will be okay. She's thinking about how to arrange things so that Croft and Lillian will work out well. The maid informs me that a prince has come to see the lady. Entering the room, His Highness asks the girl if she is angry with him. She thought about the fact that he was the tyrant who was always angry. The prince says he thought something was wrong since the girl didn't show up for breakfast. Young lady to answer that she usually skips her morning meal. However, the gentleman thought they would eat together. Riviera asks if he doesn't like to eat alone, and the prince replies that he's tired of eating alone. The protagonist thought about the fact that there were over 50 people in the guild and not one to share a meal with him. The young lady says she's not mad or sick, and it's just a bruise she got on her forehead. Seeing this, Croft apologized. The lady says she was afraid that's what he would say, and so she avoided him. Since it's her fault, and the prince has nothing to apologize for, Croft says that if anyone sees it, they'll think of it as an oversight on his part. Riviera argues that it makes no difference since she knows it is not Mr. Wine. His Majesty proposes to begin the training they have been putting off for so long. He informs her that if she is going to be his, let her use her fists and feet, not her forehead. Riviera reports that she warned, "Don't do anything you can get busted for." The prince says he'll try, and since the problem is solved, suggests going out to eat. The young lady thought of the fact that the prince did not eat alone. It was necessary to find him a friend, and it would be best to introduce Lillian to him. However, it is the first impression that counts. The princess says that the Countess of Grass came by recently, and she introduced her to a girl who could be a maid of honor. The gentleman replies that he has heard about it. Croft thought about the fact that the old fox had decided to put a rat in with them, and the reason she wants to introduce the spy to Riviere is obvious. The protagonist reports that this girl is beautiful and kind, and she seems to have a bright soul. The lady thinks that if the prince meets her, he will surely like her. Hearing this, the gentleman replies that it is not yet known. The lady suggests a private meeting. Riviera realizes that His Majesty is not happy now, but when he meets Lillian, things will be different. However, she is the fatal partner he is destined to be with according to the original story. If he doesn't meet sooner than he should, the Empire's peace will come sooner. Suddenly, Melek enters the room and informs them that Kinzel is hurt. Hearing this, the princess asks Croft how on earth she could have been injured. The enchantress won't say who wounded her, but it sounds like the knights know who did it. In the entire continent, there aren't many people capable of injuring Kinzel, and so only one mage comes to mind, Marmot, who must one day perish at her hands. Blake asks the captain what's wrong with the sorceress as he can't find her because she's disappeared. Knight reports that it's obvious that Kinzel went to see this rogue. The captain asks Blake where all the guild members are now. The knight replies that they said they would reach the Imperial Palace today and must be waiting in the building. The Duke tells him to take the boys with him, as he too will soon follow them. Blake asks the captain what about his coronation ceremony. Croft argues that if the sorceress went after the guy, they have a priority to help her get revenge. Suddenly, the maid informs the lord and knights that Kinzel is in Riviere's room at this time. Hearing this, His Majesty quickly ran towards them. Entering Riviere's room, the prince asks what they are doing here. The enchantress replies that she was consoling her heartache with the beauty of the princess. Croft says that if Kinzel is going somewhere, let him warn her. A young lady asking His Highness why he was acting so fed up who was hurt. However, the enchantress is now in need of treatment. The surprised prince asks Kinzel if she is so ill that she can't use healing magic. The mage replies if the captain is talking about the shoulder, she's already healed it all up. The prince suggests she bugger off. Hearing this, the enchantress says that her mental wound has not yet gone away. However, Chester takes Kinzel on his shoulders and carries him out of the room. The enchantress cries out and says if he won't take pity, then let him let her go. And if the knight doesn't, she'll finish him off. Riviera asks if Kinzel is okay since there was a lot of blood. Croft answers if it's a body wound, it's fine. He thought about the fact that if something else was affected, it was worrisome. The prince asks the young lady if she sympathizes with Kinzel. The girl replies that she is worried about her. At this time, His Highness says that there is no need to worry since she possesses healing skills. The main character says that just because a wound has healed doesn't mean the pain is gone. Croft asks if she and the sorceress have such a close relationship. Riviera responds that there is no difference. However, she couldn't care less about the person who was injured and came to her specifically for help. Croft thinks about the lady worrying about the people who have come running to her with injuries, and claims he understands everything. The young lady doesn't understand what the prince is thinking or what he's trying to convince himself of. Kinzel, turning to Chester, says that she will spare him today, and thanks to the princess she is in a good mood. Chester suggests that the sorceress make a magical circle of movement to the location of this villain, and he will finish him off. Kinzel asks if he thinks the mage Marmot is still there. However, if Chester goes alone, the mage will definitely finish him off. The sorceress states no nonsense and suggests she'd better get some food for her since she's hungry. Magician Marmot is the son of her mentor, a childhood friend and family member. However, the one who put a spell on the body of the enchantress that would never let betray him. Since that day, when Kinzel was betrayed and nearly killed by the man she trusted, there is only one reason for her to live. The enchantress claims that she must take revenge on the mage Marmot. Upon arriving at Kinzel's room, the captain and his knights state that it's impossible not to say that she doesn't know. The enchantress responds by addressing the captain that he is being selfish, since you want in one to enjoy the Riviera princess. Croft asks her if Kinzel was going to do something to the princess. The enchantress replies that she only asked the young lady to stroke her head. The prince, turning to the enchantress, tells her to make a report. Kinzel claims she couldn't get the evidence, and it seems these guys were aware of what she was looking for. The enchantress travels north to find information about Viscount Sheldon, who is involved in the death of her mother Letitia. Empress Letitia was dethroned on charges of treason with Viscount Sheldon. As a result, the Viscount was killed and all of her mother's cronies. Viscount Sheldon and the county were divided between 3 neighboring families. Ironically, the people who reported Letitia's treason were the very heads of those families. Because to overthrow everyone's favorite empress, you need one of 2 things, either hard evidence or a strong ally. However, they had no evidence at the time, and Viscount Sheldon denied his relationship with the empress, despite being brutally tortured. Croft reflects on the fact that without evidence, uncovering the truth was a difficult and time-consuming endeavor. It ended when Guilfred's faith and affection for the empress gradually faded. There is no need for further proof if there is no faith of the emperor. That's how his mother died and Croft was exiled. The prince thinks about the fact that if there is no proof, an ally is needed. The conspirators who were capable of slandering his mother were rewarded handsomely for doing so. Croft investigating the case of 3 families who could receive compensation for conspiracy, they encountered Marmot. The enchantress is informed that the evidence has been destroyed, and the captain agrees with her. Kinzel states that it looks like Marmot has become the lapdog of the Grand Duchy of Pesselos. When Croft survived in the East and began to investigate his mother's affairs, he found out that all the clues and evidence were connected to the Grand Duke Penzilos. However, the problem is that evidence is hard to find, since the Grand Duke hid the truth for years. Blake asks the captain what they're going to do now. Croft replies that it doesn't matter, since the Emperor can kill the Empress thanks to false evidence, and he asks if they think they can't handle some Grand Duke. Croft says he was curious why he wanted to get rid of his mother. Prince wanted to prove that the accusations against her were false. However, he doesn't realize how much it matters now that the coronation is 5 days away. The prince will become emperor and lead Duke Pesselos to his most horrible doom. Riviere asks the prince if Kinzel is okay. Croft replies that she will sleep for a while because she needs to recover the energy she has expended. However, she couldn't sleep, so she pestered you to stroke her head. The young lady says she didn't find it difficult at all, since Kinzel's hair is beautiful and she enjoyed stroking it. Hearing this, Croft bent his head to the girl and say his hair blacklight, Hay let her stroke it all she wanted. The surprised lady couldn't understand at first what she was doing it for. However, after stroking the hair they wallpapered, thought it was pretty good. Croft enjoys thinking about how it would be better if the princess stroked him all day. The young lady states, addressing His Highness, that she doesn't understand what the situation is at all. The prince replies that they will train in martial arts. Croft explains that a person's weakness is usually centered in the body. He points his finger at the vermis forehead, and nose-chin-chin neck is the solar plexus. Everything else they will slowly learn later. The gentleman states that it is most effective to start at the solar plexus. Riviera thought about the fact that this man was serious. The prince points his finger at his chest and asks what needs to be done here. The lady replies that you have to use your fist. At this time, Croft asks if he will dodge by putting his left foot back. The princess replies that she can follow it up with a left-hand punch. The prince asks, and what if this time he ducks to the right? The girl says she needs to grab the ego by the scruff first. Croft suggests that the girl just try to do what he said. Moving on to the fight, the guy keeps ducking, and there's no way Riviera can hit him, and thought about how annoying it was to her. Suddenly, the prince grabs the girl and thinks about whether he should hug her right now. The lady punches the prince in the chest with all her might and is pleased to say she's hit. Croft pretends to be in pain, and the flustered girl asks if he's okay. Taking a little breath, the guy asks if her arm is okay. Princess replies that her hand is fine, however she is worried, and asks how he is feeling. The master says it's all right, and thought about the fact that she was worried about him. Croft says he's in pain and looked at him. Riviera thought about how his facial expression didn't match his words. The girl apologizes, and the guy suggests she doesn't need to apologize. The Duke, used to this situation, hugs the girl and thinks about the fact that kissing her is not allowed. Riviera asks His Highness how she should resist such a situation. The prince offers to push her aside, and she says she can't do it. Then he suggests stepping on his foot or kicking him between the legs, and then realized to misspoke. Croft apologizes. The girl says she has forgiven him. However, she asks why he did it, and if she is the first person to pet him. The princess says, addressing His Highness, that despite the circumstances you can't hug so tightly. Duke say he apologized for that. Croft suggests sitting down for starters. The young lady, addressing His Highness, says if after such words he goes straight to action, he may be misunderstood. However, she did not give him her consent to act. The Duke tells her to answer now, since he wants to give the girl a hug, and asks if it can be done. Riviera replies that you can't, and the surprised prince asks why. The young lady says she wants to ask him a question about why the prince desires it. Croft says she smells nice, and he likes her gentle hands. Loving the look in her eyes directed at him. I like her voice calling to him. The prince says he likes the Riviera. Hearing this, the princess thought what nonsense he had just said. However, in a couple of days, when Lillian moves into the palace, a spark of love must pass between her and Croft. The protagonist reflects on the fact that she has only beaten him a few times in all this time of dating, and she wonders where the prince got his feelings for her. However, if you think about it, she still felt sorry for him a couple of times, because there's a lot to be sorry for. The young lady doesn't understand what she needs to do. The princess turns to His Ego Highness, but he offers me a word of silence. Riviera thinks about the first time the prince has ever said something like that to someone, and she doesn't understand why it's her. The young lady reports that she likes him too, but certainly not romantically, and asks if his feelings for her are the same. The princess reported that he is sure to meet his soulmate and life partner who will give him lots of love. Hearing these words, Croft is a little surprised, and the lady asks if he understood her. In the morning, while the maid was doing her makeup, the princess notices that something is wrong with her and asks what's wrong. Zeroni replies that Lady Ilmenda is coming here in a couple days, and the flustered maid says she can't help the princess do her makeup anymore. Tomorrow, the protagonist of this world, the tyrant's companion, the pity-inducing miserable Lillian, will finally arrive at the palace. The princess ponders whether she had better get there today, considering what nonsense Croft, who has yet to see the love of his life, is talking. Riviera imagines the prince embracing Lillian and telling her that these feelings no longer mean anything to him, and it's time for her to get out of the palace. Zeroni asks Mistress if she can reserve the right to choose her outfits. The princess takes the maid by the hand and says she couldn't have done anything without her, until Zeroni decides to leave on her own, and until then she will remain her main assistant. Since these are not empty words, however, there is no useful information in her pretty little head to help with household chores. The maid says for pleasure that she will not begrudge or interfere with Lady Ilmenda. However, she wants nothing more than to be near the princess. The princess says that this lady will come to the palace since she and the prince are destined to fall in love. However, she had no intention of making her her maid. Hearing this, a surprised Zeroni asks why there is a second lady in the court for the role of bride if the princess has already been announced as the future empress. The maid asks if it's possible, and says that the lady must have been very upset about it, and she had no idea. Riviera suggests that you don't have to worry about that, as long as she doesn't want to take her place at the side of the future emperor, and asks who told the maid she was announced. Zeroni replies that people are saying that after the prince's coronation, her marriage to him will also take place. Hearing this, the protagonist ponders if everyone around her thinks she will become empress and doesn't understand how she can set Croft up with Lillian. Riviera tells Zeroni that she doesn't want to be empress. However, she likes the idea of His Highness and Lady Ilmenda having a relationship, as she wholeheartedly blesses them. The princess suggests the maid not to believe the rumors that she will become the consort of the future ruler. Zeroni says the prince is who he is, but she thinks his feelings for the princess are real. The maid says she will cheer for her success and let her not be discouraged. Riviera, hearing this, thought that if it was true, it would only make her feel worse. The palace of the Imperial Palace were all 300 knights of the Imperial Guard, since Vindictus's mercenaries arrived yesterday in full force. However, there are surely Duke Pasilos's rats in the Imperial Guard. Therefore, it is necessary to weed them out of the ranks of the main army and replace them with reliable mercenaries. So the prince's gang did background checks on all the soldiers. 22 of them turned out to be linked to Penzilos. He may well have been planning to use them to stage a coup d'etat. The knight among themselves say that the princess blew off the captain. Blake says that apparently Lady Riviere is not to the taste of a man like the captain. Mielik claims that the princess is beautifully elegant and sophisticated, and their commander is far to her. Chaster reports that people can hear and suggests thinking about what they are talking about. Looking at the couple I arrived, Mielik thought about what the captain was counting on with such a beautiful lady. The knight informs His Highness that the guardsmen are awaiting orders. He also greeted Lady Riviere and kissed her hand. Seeing this, Croft tells Blake to get rid of this knight. The guy says he's not on the list of traitors, but the captain says he is. Mielik was appointed the new captain of the Imperial Guard. 50 of Vindictus's mercenaries were enlisted into the guard, and the past ones were dismissed to maintain the same number of soldiers. And those associated with Duke Penzilos were also removed. When the Imperial Palace has a new master, the entire inner circle of the ruler changes. Since Croft's palace must have people close to him, Croft turns to the princess and kisses her hand. The surprised girl asks why he suddenly did it. The prince answering that guy did the same thing. Riviera asks if he's talking about the captain of the guard. His Highness says he is already a former captain of the guard. Young lady explained that it is simply a form of greeting that means the person is happy to meet. Croft says he is happy to see her in every moment of his life. The prince anxiously asks the lady if she was close friends with him to be so happy to meet him. Riviera replies that it's just part of etiquette and asks if she didn't teach him that. Croft claims that the more he learns about the rules of behavior, the more useless they seem to him. The lady suggests that he may not follow them if he doesn't want to. Suddenly, Mielik informs the captain that the boys want to meet the princess. Riviera, giving her name, reports that His Highness said they were trustworthy men, and she welcomes them into the guard. Mielik asks about what the captain will tell him to do. Croft replies that nothing needs to be done until his coronation. However, if they're bored, they can have a party. The protagonist thought that such informal communication between the captain and the knights might become a problem later on. The young lady turns to Mielik and says, since he has become captain of the Imperial Guard, he should address the prince differently, since such a communication between the future ruler and the guard commander could hit Croft's reputation hard. Rivera suggests that it would be better if in public he addressed the prince as Your Highness and after the coronation as Your Majesty. Upon hearing this, Mielik agreed with the princess. The next day, the news that Croft had reorganized the guard spread among the high society. Pesilos. Say he was curious how that idiot from the east would take control of the empire, and he started specifically with the army. Rumors have spread among the aristocrats that Princess Blanche is rejecting the prince's advances. However, she is prophesied to take the place of empress. The aristocrats talk about how the Duke of Blanche's daughter is a refined lady who may not like a man from the east. Some aristocrats were making barbs at the prince, while others were pondering the future. Everyone was thinking about whether or not they could tie themselves to the emperor with the help of their daughters. Secretly, everyone hoped that their daughter would steal the emperor's heart. Duke Blanche, speaking to his daughter, says that after her mother's death, he devoted all his time and energy to her. He made a promise to do everything to make her the best, so he even refused to remarry. The father asks his daughter, how dare she do this to him after all this? The protagonist thought about the fact that he raised her for money, but would never admit it. Riviera turns to her father and says that she doesn't understand about what he's trying to say. The Duke offers to explain to his daughter where the rumors came from. Blanche claims that his daughter has chosen to ignore the prince because he is considered a barbarian from the East. He asks if his daughter has decided to break up the marriage. The young lady asks why he says that, since the prince is a wonderful man. The girl thought about whether she was ignoring him or not because her life was at stake. Riviera thought about the fact that maybe people didn't know him well, but however, the prince certainly didn't deserve to be ignored. The protagonist asked who even dared to call Prince Barbarian from the East. However, she had just heard her father dare to say rude things about the man who would become the Luan emperor. The aristocrats despised and simultaneously rejoiced in an emperor who was completely unsuited for the role. Because the ruler of the head of state had such a difficult past, the upper classes laughed at his ignorance of the basics of the Soviet way of life. The aristocrats hoped to capitalize on his stupidity and seize power. Those who sided with Croft also wanted to get their way by manipulating the new emperor. Among them, the Duke of Blanche was the most prominent and risked the most. And his ambition surpassed any man of nobility. Blanche, turning to his daughter, says he understands her and thinks he shouldn't go out with the prince since he may have been wrong about him. The father informs his daughter that he will work things out and suggests she not to worry. The protagonist doesn't understand in what sense he decides and thinks he can screw things up. A servant informs the prince that Duke Blanche has thrown him an audience. The prince invites him in and thinks of Herzog helping him, but he is however overly chatty. The count informs me that the Marquis of Deforden has given his consent. It was for this that Blanche had taken great pains to persuade him. The Marquis de Deforden is the man who was exiled from the empire because he and to the very end expressed opposition to the overthrow of Empress Laetitia. And from then on, this man lived in seclusion in the woods. The prince, turning to the duke, says he realizes how much he does for him. Blanche addresses His Highness respectfully, but he would like to hear something more specific. Croft asks if he's talking about the reward since he realizes he's done a good job, and he's thinking about how brazen that is. The Duke apologizes and asks how long the prince is going to keep his daughter suspended. Blanche claims that his daughter is in love with His Highness, and he can't just watch his bloodchild suffer because of unrequited feelings. Duke Blanche says for His Highness to make his daughter his empress. The prince reflects on the fact that before Riviere entered the palace, they made a secret deal. When the prince agreed to these terms, he believed that the Duchess in no way wants to marry him. He did not even think that the princess will begin to have feelings for him. Duke Blanche reports if the prince is not going to marry his daughter, he is no longer willing to support him. And of course, he should not expect support from the Marquis of Deforden. Hearing all this, Croft says he'll talk to Riviere. However, the Duke insists it's time to get the wedding ceremony ready. The prince replies that he needs to get her opinion since he can't force the lady to marry him. Blanche wonders what the prince is talking about since his daughter is head over heels in love with him. Croft says he understands and suggests he leave. The Duke thought about the fact that he was going to have to be tough now, and he's going to make this marriage work no matter what it takes. After this conversation, the prince thinks that the Duke has clearly misunderstood something. It just couldn't be, although he'd really like to believe it. The prince reflects on the fact that Riviere will never change his mind, since he had called in a mage a few days ago to certify that deal. The Duke has an idea and is wondering if she'll sympathize with him this time. The princess reflects on what Father Croft said to Croft during the meeting. However, Dad came out extremely displeased, and the girl thinks about the fact that they had a fight. However, the girl's thoughts were interrupted by the prince who came to her. Riviere asks His Highness what the matter is, and he replies that it's something to do with the Duke of Blanche. The young lady asks what he said to him. Croft says that if he doesn't marry her, he'll lose all support. When the main character heard about it, she thought her dad had lost his mind. The young lady thinks Croft is supposed to be a tyrant, but now looks like an abandoned puppy in the rain. However, the point may be that he's a prince with no real influence who hasn't even had a coronation ceremony. On his way to the throne, Croft was supported by about 50 mercenaries who had traveled with him from the east and then joined the Imperial Guard. Included in this lineup is the young Prince Azin, who has enlisted the support of influential relatives on his mother's side, and also about Duke Pesilos, who has concentrated power in his own hands, which Croft has a hard time pulling off. However, Prince now looks not like a feral rabid dog, but like a puppy who might be thrown out on the streets again. The main character is thinking about the fact that she doesn't want to get married, but wants to leave this palace as soon as possible. But at the same time, she hates the idea of Croft being stripped of everything he's worked so hard to achieve. The prince thinks about the fact that he is now between two fires, and even if he remains unsupported and outside the palace walls again, he can just lead the Eastern Army and take over as planned. Croft ponders that perhaps it's fairer this way, but then he won't get Riviere, and he won't get the revenge he wanted. The guy's thinking about how he needs a princess. His Majesty turns to the girl and says that the Duke has said that Riviere is crazy about him, even though she claimed to hate it. The princess says her father never listens to what he's told, and she doesn't hate him. Hearing this, Croft takes the princess by the hand and says once so and proposes to marry him, since he really likes her, and if he has to marry someone, only her. The prince informs if she becomes his empress, he will do anything she asks. The girl asks if he will notarize it. Croft asks what she wants to get, assuring this is a condition. The protagonist replied that it was no big deal, just have him promise that they could divorce at any time, and he will be able to provide her with a comfortable and safe life after that. The surprised prince turns to Riviere and tells her that he has just proposed to her, and asks if she thinks it's weird to talk about divorce in this situation. The protagonist claims that His Highness will want the divorce more than she does, and she promises to leave the prince herself when the time comes, since it would even be to his advantage. The surprised prince, hearing this, thinks about what's in the girl's head, since all these conditions are not natural even without notarizing the magician. Just like the fact that I'm going to a magician. Croft realizes that this request is understandable, given that he is the son of a madman who killed his own wife with his own hands. The prince asks if she will marry him if they make the arrangement official. The young lady agrees with him. Croft is pleased to announce that the wedding ceremony will take place on the same day as the coronation, and offers to make things easier and quicker. The protagonist thought that he was in too much of a hurry because the coronation ceremony would take place in 2 days. The princess states that there's a lot to prepare, and at the very least clothes for them as well. Croft offers the girl to choose the date because he agrees to any day. The princess says she'll talk to the headmaid and then inform him. Duke claims that if they decide on a date for the ceremony, they will announce it right away. However, the Duke of Blanche will be informed in advance. Riviera utters, addressing His Highness, that she wishes her father to be safe as well. Because of Guilfred, his mother's second family also died. The blood says he realizes since the princess doesn't trust him. However, he's not like him. The protagonist doesn't understand who the prince means. His Highness turning to the girl and promising that she and her family will be safe. Lying in bed, the young lady can't sleep. You keep thinking about the prince. In the morning, Riviera asks the maid if the prince is awake. Zeroni replies that he's sitting in his office and she heard he was up all night. Hearing this, the protagonist was very surprised. Riviera came into the prince's office, and at this time he wondered why she had come. The young man thought about the fact that the lady might have changed her mind overnight. Croft looks at the girl and reflects on the fact that he couldn't imagine ever wanting to marry someone so badly, and he'll do his best to take care of Riviere while she's with him. Her sympathy for the prince is like feeling her sweetness on his tongue, because Croft always seemed to think that if he fought, he could achieve anything. However, he doesn't know what to do if the princess says no. Riviera thinks it's about when he proposed her words about divorce sounded a little harsh. However, it's because he doesn't have to fall in love with someone before he meets Lillian. The girl thinks about the fact that maybe he really likes her. However, the protagonist can't justify the fact that the plot says Croft will finish her off. The young lady, addressing His Highness, said she had been rude to him because she didn't understand the depth of his feelings and upset him, and so he apologizes. Hearing this, the Duke doesn't really catch her message, but makes his face even sadder. He replies that he understands since it's not easy to agree to marry someone like him. The main character objects and says that His Highness is very charming. Saddened prince claims she said divorce when they aren't even married. Riviera replies to the prince that she believes marriage is a union between people who love each other, and that's the way she'd want things to be in her life. However, they don't know when such love will appear in their lives, and therefore leaving it possible for them to part without hurting each other. The young lady claims that they have only a temporary alliance to gain her father's support. Croft looked at the princess and thought about the fact that this beauty was very wrong, since all he wants in her father is Rivière Blanche, and he just laughs because he doesn't believe in love. However, love can come to Rivière because she is beautiful, elegantly kind, and infinitely lovable. And if love exists, then all the men in the world must love this particular girl. Duchess Blanche is a kind-hearted person who is able to sympathize even with him, so she will definitely be able to feel something called love. The young lady offers to make it, so if one of them will have a favorite person, the other with a light heart agrees to divorce, and that way they'll both be happy. And peace will reign between them, and no one will be harmed. Croft agrees with the princess, and promises to never hurt her and always protect her, and if she agrees to those terms, he'll get Kinsel to certify them. The protagonist was pleased to think that everything had been resolved. However, who would have thought that Croft would agree? The young lady thought about the fact that Lillian would be arriving at the palace very soon. However, after she and the prince fall in love for everyone, there is a happy ending. The Duke recalls the lady's words and reflects on the fact that if such a man does not appear in her life, neither will this. Croft comes into the sorceress's room and tells her to get up. Magician asks who dared to wake her. Seeing Captain Kinsel, he asks him if he's crazy for playing with fire. The Duke explains that Rivière has asked to call a mage to certify the contract and asks if he should turn to someone else. Seeing the enchantress, the princess thanked her since she came and tells her that she has a request for Kinsel. The magician pronounces that she missed her very much. However, the captain told her everything because she decided to magically certify the contract. The enchantress asks who the princess made the deal with. The young lady replies that with His Highness. Kinsel asks the lady if she thinks the captain might be tricking her, and suggests that we start by casting a spell on him so that the prince speaks only the truth. The captain, turning to the enchantress, says he can hear everything. Rivière reports that's not the case. However, she wants them to promise something to each other before their wedding. The enchantress asks if they have decided to enter into a prenuptial agreement. Kinsel asks what would be the most important condition, because she can make him die the most painful death if he falls out of love with her. However, if he made her cry, he himself would shed bloody tears until he died. And if the princess suffers for the captain, he will drown in the gutter. The magician asks if all of these items should be processed at once. Rivière reports that she just needs to assure a few conditions regarding the divorce. Hearing this, the enchantress laughed, and says she realized since the princess needs the captain to agree to the divorce on her first word, and asks if she wants 90% of the estate to go to her. Hearing this, the princess objects. Kinsel claims that her love for them keeps her from thinking straight, and she assumes the princess wants everything after all. The Duke explains that if Rivière meets someone he truly loves, they will divorce. Croft claims that for his part, he promises not to harm her, and is obliged to do everything possible to make sure that the princess lives a happy and peaceful life after the dissolution of the marriage. Prince argues that this also constitutes all of Kinsel's conditions. The enchantress asks in surprise what this nonsense is all about, and she doesn't realize then to certify such obvious terms. Kinsel suggests that the mistress not let the captain fool her, and after the divorce, the princess gets all the property. However, the young lady claims she has had enough of what the prince said. Hearing this, the enchantress says she is so generously kind and slightly naive. The mage agrees since that's what the two of them want. However, she can't assure words like happy or calm, because their meaning is too vague. Kinsel argues that conditions prohibiting any harm should also be taken with care. Hearing this, Croft turns to the sorceress and asks if she thinks the princess will be able to kill him with her little fists. Kinsel replies that she doesn't think Rivière would even snap a chicken's neck. The enchantress asks if the princess wants to make a marriage contract with the captain, according to which, if she falls in love with someone, to leave him. The mage pronounces that he understands her fear, as this rabid dog could attach and harm her. However, she needs to ensure her safety. Rivière objects and says that's not the reason, because the prince might find one he likes, and she wants the prince to have a chance to be with his true love. Kinsel says she'll certify the contract. However, it will take effect immediately after magical activation. Enchantress argues, since they are not married yet, it will therefore be difficult to assure the terms regarding the divorce. She makes the decision to do everything after the wedding ceremony. The magician says if that's the case, she'll go back to sleep, and asks me to wake her up on her wedding day as she will set off the celebratory fireworks. The princess turns to the sorceress, says, since she is already awake, she can take part in the coronation, which will take place tomorrow. Kinzel heard this and laughed, and says that she purposely wants to sleep through this boredom. Riviera, looking at the prince and seeing his pitiful look, says that she is not going to leave him now. Hey, His Highness replies that he trusts her completely. On the day of the ceremony, Dionel Pesilos asks Lillian if she's worried. He reassures his sister and says he will visit her. The girl replies that she's still not at ease. Dionel, going along with her sister, wondering if she can win this man's favor and take the place of the Empress. He looks at his sister and thinks she should get as close to Rivière Blanche as possible. The brother doesn't understand what his father was thinking. However, it is possible that Lillian will do well because she is famous for her beauty. Lady Rivière greeted Lillian cheerfully. The protagonist suggests her maid of honor make herself at home. And looking at her, the princess thinks she's really worried. The protagonist looks at Lillian and thinks about making Croft into a human and giving it to her. Dionel asks his sister if she will introduce him to the princess. Lillian introduces her brother to the princess. Dionel thanks the main character for making Lillian so welcome, because he is touched by Riviera's kindness. The princess asks Lillian if they should leave them so they can say goodbye in peace. The surprised girl asks her brother if he wanted to say anything to her. Dionel says he'll come to see her often, but now he has to go back. He turns to the Duchess and says he is delighted to make their acquaintance. However, asks her to be kind to his cousin. The protagonist offers her maid of honor to show her to her chambers and unpack her luggage, since she will then introduce Lillian to the prince at dinner. Riviera realizes that the girl is clearly scared. However, there are a lot of bad rumors about Croft that may have reached her. The princess reports that the prince can sometimes be quite abrupt, but despite this, he is a very good man. Sitting at table in the evening, the Duke saw the ladies and thought another uninvited guest. The princess introduced His Highness to Lady Lillian Ilmenda, who had come to the palace to be her maid of honor. Lillian reports that it's a big part of getting to know His Highness. The main character, when she saw the Duke not doing what she taught him, then thought he was an asshole since she spent a lot of time on him. Riviera prompts the Duke to kiss her hand, and at the same time, he kisses her hand. The princess informs me that His Highness should invite the maid of honor to the palace. The protagonist speaks very quietly and warns that if he is not more polite to Lillian, she will not dine or dance with him. However, the princess reminds him that she is still his etiquette teacher. Sitting at the dinner table, the protagonist thought something was wrong, and she's asking why it's so quiet as a swamp. The protagonist realizes that in the original novel, despite the social difference between them, a spark did not erupt between them at first sight. Riviera doesn't realize where she went wrong as her plan falls apart. Notices a saddened Princess Croft asking her if she didn't like the food. The protagonist thought about the fact that it wasn't hers for him to ask. The princess asks Lillian if she likes these dishes. Suddenly, the maid of honor looked at the prince and thought about the fact that Duke Pasilos was the coldest man she had ever met. Riviera asks the girl if she's okay. Lillian apologizes and leaves the auditorium. The prince says she has terrible manners. However, the protagonist remembers that the first impression Lillian made on Croft must be a good one. The Duke suggests that the princess sit down as the food is getting cold. The protagonist, addressing His Highness, says, "I think there's something wrong with Lillian." The prince says it doesn't matter how many times as long as she gets along well with her maid of honor. Croft turns to Rivière and tells her to listen to him since she has eaten practically nothing. Hearing this, the protagonist was very surprised since I showed her that Lillian didn't get him in any way. The princess suggests to His Highness if he wants to follow Lillian, she won't mind. Croft reports that even though he's called a rabid dog, he won't chase down a girl to finish her off for not following table etiquette. The surprised lady reports that she didn't quite mean it. The prince replies that there is no need for that now. The protagonist objects since it should never be done that way, and the prince agrees. Riviera asks if Lillian has become unnerved by his cold attitude toward her. She suggests the prince be more friendly, since she taught him how to say hello to the ladies and asks why he didn't. Croft replies that this is the way they greet ladies who are welcome, asking if he has learned her lesson badly, and tells me he's not happy with Lillian. Princess, thinking about the fact that she is the love of his life, and says Lillian is his guest, and he should have been friendlier. Herzog replies that he has no reason to do so, and he was polite to let Pesilos's niece stay in the palace. The protagonist wanted to object, but in the original, Lillian was ordered by the Duke to continue seeing Croft despite being afraid of him. However, it was on her uncle's orders that she came to the palace as a maid of honor. The affair was sad because two enemies who couldn't be together fell in love with each other. So Lillian's reaction is understandable. But as soon as they met, a spark flared between them and they fell in love. In the original, Croft went crazy every time he saw Lillian, and the protagonist thought something had gone wrong here, because looks always give away people's feelings. The Duke informs me that he's only happy to see her Riviere, and asks if they'll dance tonight. Suddenly, the protagonist realized that the reason is her. Concerned Lillian is in her room, thinking that she must please the prince and become empress. She doesn't understand why she has to marry someone who can kill with one look, and especially since he had already given his heart to another. Suddenly, the head maid enters the maid of honor's room and says she heard the girl leave the table during dinner. The maid asks if the Duke was angry when he found out. Lillian realized that there were already people in the palace watching her. The maid claims that the Duke told her to think of her family, and she won't talk about what happened today, and suggests the lady try not to disappoint the gentleman in the future. Excited Lillian thought about the fact that she had nowhere to run. Riviera heard that they were having a wedding in 10 days. The young lady doesn't understand how she can manage to organize an imperial wedding in so little time. Zeroni reports that His Highness said the ceremony could be simple, so 10 days is enough time to prepare. The protagonist thought about the fact that she just wanted to assure the terms of the marriage faster before Croft fell in love with Lillian, and she feels like everything is going according to plan. The maid says she heard that the room for the dance rehearsal is ready, and asks the mistress what she's doing. Riviera replies that she doesn't know if now is the right time to dance, since dancing in such a situation is something she can't even imagine. The princess asks the maid how Lillian is feeling. Zeroni answers that the lady has not left her chambers. The surprised protagonist asks if the maid of honor has eaten properly, and says he'll have the maids take care of her, a servant girl claiming that mistress is incredibly kind. Seeing in Princess Croft asks if she's heard that the wedding is in 10 days. The young lady asks if it's necessary to be in such a hurry, and suggests that it be postponed to a later date. Hearing this, the Duke objects, as there is no need and time is not enough. The princess thought about it and says that in general, you can make it in a little over a week. Croft thinks about how she doesn't even know how much he's looking forward to this wedding, and she has no idea how much he likes her. He even agrees to a divorce if she meets someone she loves. The prince would give anything to kiss those lips. However, if she felt the same way he did. The Duke, turning to Riviere, says he wants to kiss her, but the protagonist objects to him. However, he offers her a dance. Riviera thought about the fact that his hand should be taking Lillian's and not hers. The main character was only looking for a way to survive, not how to rewrite the original from beginning to end. She doesn't even know if she can take Croft's love like a bomb. However, the protagonist does not want to become an empress. The real Riviere's place is completely unsuitable for an insignificant person like her. As much as the protagonist can't accept Croft's feelings, she has to give in to it. The princess thinks about the fact that she feels sorry for the Duke, since she is the first one who could sympathize with him. Croft asks the lady if she's mad that he wanted to kiss her. The princess objects to him and says that he is not at all. The princess realizes that she didn't want to see a sad prince with an empty hand outstretched. However, she said she wasn't mad at him and accepted the offer as much as she took his hand. The protagonist thinks about whether if he presses her harder and jabs her face into his neck, she will run away. For now, however, the situation is acceptable. Late that night, the prince heard his name being called, and coming into the main hall, he saw Duke Pesalos, who informs the prince that they have not seen each other for a long time. Ergertsorg says he can address him by his first name for now, and he's excited to finally see Croft grow up. The prince agrees with him and says that they really haven't seen each other in a long time. His uncle says that from childhood, Croft was like his father, and now it seems to him that the late emperor sits before him. Croft listens to the Duke and senses the threat in his words. Pesalos claims to have the same face as the man who lost his mother, and now he sits where he sat. Croft thought about how much easier it would be to start a conflict right away, and asks his uncle if he came here to die. The uncle replies that he is here for him, his nephew, and asks if he wishes to restore the honor of the late Queen Letitia. A surprised Croft reports that he had not thought to hear his mother's name from him, since only rage and lust for place kept him afloat. Croft, when he was in the East, got all the information he could and tried to investigate the circumstances of his mom's death. But no matter what he did or who he went to, there were no results. Pesilos looked at his nephew and thought that if he had the chance, he would finish him off right now. However, the uncle reports that he has recently obtained evidence that would restore Letitia's good name. Croft replies that he doesn't need any proof. Pesilos claimed that without them, no one will believe him. The prince replies that anyone would believe the emperor's statement. However, the captain ponders whether there was evidence against his mother in the past. Because the emperor's mere suspicion was enough to finish off the first woman of the empire, since he doesn't need proof to get revenge. Since Guilford is already dead, it's enough for Croft to slit the throat of whoever is sitting in front of him. However, will it be enough for his mother, who never received vindication in the eyes of the people? Pesilos says he's not in the same position his father was, and asks if the upper class will believe him without proof. Prince, claiming he's not going to negotiate anything with him, since the point of politics is to go for what one wants, even if one doesn't like the path itself. The uncle says that his nephew forgets that when he becomes a ruler, he will also be responsible for other people, and their lives will depend on it. He sets an example by how much of his precious Duchess Blanche, who will be his wife in 10 days. Croft asks his uncle about the fact that his visit here is definitely not a graceful way to commit suicide. Pesilos says his life is also in Croft's hands, but if he dies today, his mother will always be remembered as a vicious empress, and his beloved Rivière Blanche, as well as those she loves, will never be safe. The prince tells his uncle to tell him what he wants. Pesilos pronounces to make Lillian a concubine and keep her in the palace, and that's all he needs. Croft reports that he doesn't know what his uncle is hoping for, but it's not going to happen. Pesilos reports that everyone in the capital already knows he's crazy about Duchess Blanche, and the uncle offers to rein in the princess's father, who thinks he's someone else. His uncle informs him that when he gets Lillian settled, he will send him evidence that will help exonerate his mother. Blake suggests that the prince finish off his uncle, and if he only says so, Pesilos won't even have time to take 2 steps outside. As Rivière has dear and beloved people, and the prince is sure that he can protect her, but he can't protect the others, even if he introduces his squad to them. Croft says once he becomes emperor, he'll cut off his limbs and then strangle him. For 17 years, the prince had dreamed of the place. He realizes that nothing bad will happen if he waits a little longer. Chester asks His Highness what to do about Pesilos' niece, and how to explain that to the Duchess. Malik offers to say that the Duke threatened the prince into making her his concubine. But Croft doesn't agree, because Rivière doesn't need to know about it, as well as many other things. During the meeting after the visit to Duke Pesilos, it was decided to talk things out, since it's the right decision, but they're not that close. When the princess entered the hall, greeted the lord, says that today is a special good morning, but he is such a frown, and asks what happened. The prince announces that he has decided to make Lillian Ilmandu his concubine. Hearing about it, the protagonist says it's a great idea, and thinks about the fact that the original plot itself couldn't just change like that. Rivera reports that she knew this would happen from the moment she first saw Lady Lillian, and claims it's a great solution. The prince reflects on the fact that the lady doesn't love him, and he was still wrong to think they were getting close. Croft felt as if his heart had stopped beating. The protagonist notices that something is wrong and asks if His Highness is okay. The prince replies that he's not fine. Riviera suddenly noticed that his face looked like he was about to cry. The lady thought something was hurting him. The princess asks whether to call the palace physician or Kinsel. The lady moves closer to the Duke and asks what ails him. Croft asks her if she cares about him. The lady replies that she is worried and asks her to tell her what his pain is. Hearing this, Duke says that in that case he's fine, and takes the lady's chopping block and kisses it. The prince claims, as it were, that she is his empress, and that's why it's okay. The main character thinks about the fact that even though Croft was able to love Lillian, he still treats her special. Zeroni asks Madame if she has had a fight with His Highness. The lady asks why that should be the case. The maid says she's not wearing her face, and that's why she thought something was wrong. The princess says something good happened on the contrary. Since Croft has fallen in love with Lillian, like in the original, but she can't tell the maid about it. Looking at herself in the mirror, the princess remembered what Zeroni had said about her looking bad. However, she's in a wonderful mood right now. The protagonist ponders the fact that if Lillian becomes a concubine, she won't have to worry about Croft hurting her and contemplates an escape plan. Later, when Riviera leaves the palace, the maid of honor will naturally become the empress, and then relations with Pesilos will improve, as his niece will be empress. Then Croft will not become a tyrant. The princess realizes that, From the behavior she has seen, the prince will treat Lillian well, and she will love him as in the original novel. And it will be a happy ending in which everyone is happy. However, the protagonist thought about the fact that for some reason she was not happy. She realizes she should talk to Lillian beforehand, since she might be embarrassed by such a sudden offer to become a concubine, and might refuse. Riviera asks the maid if the lady is going to her chambers now. Zeroni reports that she's in a meeting with the Duke's son in the parlor, and the Duke sent her a mountain of gifts. A surprised Lillian asks Dionel if it is true that the prince wants to make her a concubine. The aristocrat replies that her father has said all sorts of things to her again, and she doesn't have to worry, because soon she will be empress. Since her father has high hopes for her, Dionel suggests winning the prince's heart and not worrying about nothing. A concerned maid of honor informs me that she doesn't want to be ruler, since the prince is so intimidating. However, her brother claims that she will become the most noble lady of the Luan Empire. He asks if it's okay to say such stupid things when so many people are doing everything for her. Brother suggests people hurry up so they're not late for the coronation. Dionel reports that all these jewels from his father will make Lillian the fairest of any girl of the Blanche family. The temple was filled with the singing of the bishop's choir from the holy city of Linton Garden. In front of people pursuing their own goals, became the 17th ruler of the Louvain Empire. The emperor, addressing his subjects, reports that they all surely know that he grew up in the East. Because the way it's set up, you give twice as much as you get. However, he may become savage, but he will be a just ruler. Croft informs us that loyalty will be rewarded, and that one's own blood will have to answer for the spilling of another's blood. And that goes for everyone without exception. The aristocrats greeted the emperor and shouted, "Hail His Majesty Emperor Louvain." Croft thought about if his mom were alive, she would be more excited than the rest of us, because he was able to make it happen. The protagonist thought that today is really a very happy day, and she wants to share this joy with the emperor. The emperor approaches Riviere and informs her that she is his empress. The lady thought about the fact that since she hadn't married him yet, and if Lillian saw it, she would misunderstand. Riviera realizes that you can't reject his hand and embarrass him like this in front of everyone. However, the emperor takes the lady's hand, and she says that she is not yet empress, but is already walking with him. Croft claims she doesn't see anything wrong with that. Riviera reflects on the fact that he would probably like to be holding Lillian's hand right now. But judging by the way he shows respect for her, despite his feelings for the maid of honor, he will treat his future empress with dignity. When the emperor stepped aside to pay his respects to the guests, and at that moment Riviere saw her father, Blanche informs her daughter that the emperor is going to make Pessalos's niece his concubine. The daughter asks how the father found out about it. Blanche suggests Riviera not to worry, since the emperor loves only her. "Father, it's obvious that Duke Pessalos is just trying to keep his family in line. Since the emperor only loves her, it's okay. And that's what will save their family." Blanche says she's being too generous to the new ruler, but he'll still talk to him. The protagonist realized that her father cared about her father's political ambitions, not his daughter. Riviera objects to her father and says that it doesn't have to be done. Blanche reassures her daughter and says no matter how influential Pessalos is, the emperor will always be grateful to the Blanche family. Suddenly, Duke Pessalos enters the room and says that he has come to greet them away from the crowd as well. And he feels like he's interrupted a father-daughter conversation. The Duke reports that thanks to Blanche, the emperor was able to take the throne. And as his uncle is the Duke of the Empire, he is most grateful. The protagonist thought to himself, wondering if he had come to thank them. However, Croft will quickly fall in love with Lillian, and so she thought she and Pessalos would soon make up, but apparently that's not the case. Blanche reports that each of them has benefited. Since his nephew had become emperor, his daughter would soon become empress. Croft's uncle claims that the new emperor looks a lot like his late predecessor, since they are similar not only in appearance, but also in character. Pessalos asks if in the future Croft will do the same thing as his father, and if it were him, he'd be worried about his daughter.